Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Commissioners, Chief Moore, Mr. Teefank, Madam Secretary, Mr. Inspector General Mark Smith, Mr. City Attorney Carlos De La Guerra, and members of the public. Today is Tuesday, July 11th, 2023. It's 9:30 a.m. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Please let the record reflect that we have Commissioners Briggs, Calanche, Shields, and Southers, and we have a quorum. Mr. President?
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We welcome everyone attending this morning. All public comment will be heard during item number 2 on the agenda. We will dedicate a total of 45 minutes to public comment. Members of the public will have 1 minute per agenda item for a maximum of 2 minutes total. At the request of the speaker will be given 1 additional minute for general public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes total. The order of the speakers will be, in this room will go first, then the speaker watching today's session on Zoom will go second. We will alternate between the speakers in this room and Zoom for a total of 45 minutes. Members of the public who participate in public comment are reminded that they can speak to any item on the agenda or matter within the jurisdiction of the Board of Police Commissioners. Public comment is your opportunity to address the board. So you are free to express your opinion on matters before the board and to generally express when you disagree with other opinions expressed. However, directing your comments to other individuals who have spoken or attacking others who have expressed their opinion shall be deemed off topic and your public comment period will be concluded. Members of the public, if you choose to participate in the public comment portion of the agenda, you can participate in this meeting in a number of ways outlined on the agenda. For those of you in the room, please submit a speaker card to one of the officers who will then give that card to the board secretary, indicating you wish to speak during the meeting. For those on Zoom, please raise your virtual hand. This is a message for those attending today's meeting here in person. These meetings are regular meetings between the board, the department, and key stakeholders. Meetings of the Board of Police Commissioners are open to the public. The state's Ralph Brown Act affords the public the opportunity to present at the meetings, hear the presentations and dialogue in real time, and provide feedback via public comment period. During these meetings, there is a need for the board to carry out the public business expeditiously without delays or disruptions. Members of the audience shall not engage in any conduct which causes an actual disruption of the meeting. Those attending in person are reminded that disruptive behavior will be cause for removal. If you disrupt this meeting, you will be provided with only 1 warning to cease disruptive behavior. If you fail to cease such behavior, you will be removed from the meeting. While in the boardroom, members of the audience must be seated. Standing is not permitted. In the past, we have permitted standing for a few, but moving forward, this courtesy will not be afforded to attendees except for credentialed members of the press. All attendees must be seated. Failure to follow this rule will result in a warning and removal from the meeting. This time we're going to go to item number 1 on the agenda, the report of the Chief of Police. Good morning, Chief Moore.
Good morning, Commissioner President Briggs, other commissioners, Mr. City Attorney, Mr. Inspector General, Mr. Teefank. As I do each week, I'm going to speak about significant events, including any categorical use of force, our crime picture, as well as our personnel strength. Regarding the events over the last 2 weeks, first of all, I want to thank the board's hosting of the reception with our LGBTQ plus community in Pride Month. The event was well attended by both members within our communities as well as a significant number of members within the organization within the LGBTQ plus community itself. So it was an excellent opportunity to spend time together, talk about issues in the direction going forward. Secondly, I want to thank Public Safety Chair, Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez, as she hosted a buyback for 4th of July fireworks. We know that this time of year across the city, which has outlawed fireworks of any make or kind, that we see a proliferation of individuals who sell these fireworks in neighborhoods, endangering neighborhoods with these materials. This buyback, which is the third now, affords the community the ability to turn in fireworks in exchange for various gift cards and sporting tickets. Over the course of the event on Saturday, July 1st, in the northeastern part of the San Fernando Valley, more than 300 pounds, nearly 400 pounds of fireworks was turned in exchange for these gift cards. We do think that these events bring awareness and education to the dangers of fireworks in Los Angeles. Dangers not only in the sense of the fire safety, but also the safety of individuals who oftentimes unknowingly engage in this type of use of fireworks, not realizing the dangers. This year was no exception, where we saw individuals in our communities, primarily young folks, some as young as 11 years of age, suffer lasting injuries, including the loss of fingers and hands with the explosion of fireworks that they were attempting to light. Additionally, I want to talk about the events of 2 officer-involved shootings that occurred during this period of time, both involving hits. First is in 77th Division. This occurred on the 28th of June at approximately 1 o'clock in the morning in the 7200 block of Southwestern Avenue. At that time, 77th Division uniform officers were conducting a traffic stop on a black 2016 Lexus in the rear parking lot of a fast food restaurant. As the officers spoke with a lone driver there, they heard multiple gunshots coming from a strip mall parking lot directly south of them. There they observed a male, later identified as a Michael Meadows, male black, 44 years of age, and saw him standing in the parking lot and across from them. He was observed walking west towards an occupied and open business and firing multiple rounds from a handgun. The officers immediately engaged Meadows, resulting in officer-involved shootings. Meadows was struck by gunfire, causing him to drop his weapon and fall to the ground. He was subsequently pronounced deceased at the scene by LA fire personnel. A 9mm semi-automatic ghost gun, equipped with a threaded barrel, which is a sound suppressor capacity, had an empty 6-round Glock magazine. That was recovered from the scene. The firearm had an empty chamber, and the trigger on the firearm was pulled to the rear. Unfortunately, there was no officers or civilians injured during this incident, including the occupants of the business in which Mr. Meadows was firing towards. The traffic stop was unrelated to the officer-involved shooting. The driver there also was not injured and was later left the scene. Force Investigation Division detectives responded to the scene and are investigating this incident. The second event occurred on the 9th of July, this past Sunday at just before 9 o'clock in the morning in the West Valley area. At about 8:35 in the morning, West Valley uniform officers responded to multiple radio calls involving a suspect randomly assaulting several victims in the 5800 block of Reseda Boulevard. The suspect was described as a female black, in her 30s, armed with a metal pipe. When officers arrived at the scene, they were directed to the northwest corner of Reseda Boulevard and Burbank Boulevard, where they encountered a woman later identified as Jessica Brown, a female black, 35 years of age. She was in a parking lot of a gas station. Ms. Brown immediately began walking towards the officers while holding up an approximately 15-inch metal bar above her head. Despite the officers giving Brown numerous commands to drop her weapon, she continued to advance towards them. One officer fired and struck Brown with a 40mm less lethal projectile. However, it had no apparent effect, and Brown continued to walk towards the officers with the metal bar raised above her head. As Brown approached within 5 feet, she attempted to strike one of the officers with the metal bar, resulting in an officer-involved shooting and a deployment of a taser. Brown was struck by gunfire, fell to the ground, and was taken into custody without further incident. Officers rendered aid at the scene with Brown until the arrival of LA City fire personnel. She was ultimately transported by rescue ambulance to a nearby medical center where she was pronounced deceased a short time later. There were no officers injured during this incident. Our preliminary investigation has identified that Brown assaulted 4 female victims in a matter of minutes leading up to the officer-involved shooting. Brown struck these individuals on the head and the facial area with a metal bar, causing serious head injuries. 2 of the victims were admitted to a local hospital due to their injuries. 2 other victims, after being treated, were released. West Valley detectives believe Brown was also responsible for assaulting 4 additional victims with a metal pipe on the evening prior. Fortunately, those victims were not seriously injured. Force Investigation Division responded to this event and are investigating this incident, including a consultation with our Mental Evaluation Unit, Department of Mental Health, and Department of Children and Family Services regarding Ms. Brown's mental health history, including actions taken by those agencies to provide mental health services to her. With this last officer-involved shooting this past Sunday, that makes a total of 13 officer-involved shootings for the year. That number last year was 18. That's a 28% reduction. Our 4-year average is just over 16 for a 21% reduction. Our number of fatal officer-involved shootings this year stand at 7. That number last year was 8. Our 4-year average at this time, again, averaged over the course of the entire year, is just over 6.5. In regards to our crime picture, we continue to see an overall reduction in violent crime as well as property crime in the state of Los Angeles for overall 3.1% reduction in Part 1 crime. For our homicides, that means that we have 155 homicides versus 200 homicides last year. That's 45 fewer victims. We have 1,689 fewer violent crime victims for a 10.2% reduction. In comparison to 2019, which is the pre-COVID era, if you would, we stand at just under a 1% reduction in violent crime. However, our challenges continue to be in gun violence with homicides as well as aggravated assaults being above our 2019 levels. We also see this in the area of robberies, that while we have a 16% reduction in the number of robberies involving firearms have increased more than 13% over that same period. In regards to our shots fired, again, this is demonstrated with our victim shot. We have 135 fewer victims shot this year versus last year. That's an 18% reduction. However, in regards to 2019, we stand at a 13.8% increase. I do want to call out a couple of instances this past 2-week period that give me considerable concern relative to sexual assaults in residences in the San Fernando Valley, as well as a series of shootings that happened this past week in the Hollenbeck area, and then lastly, an arson attack at City Hall over the weekend. First, in regards to sexual assaults, on the 1st of July in West Valley area, we had an individual who attempted or committed a sexual assault on 3 various females of ages ranging from 9 to 55 years of age. They were able to enter the residence of these apartments by undoing screens that were over partially or open windows due to the heat in the area. These apartments, as this individual climbed through them, he found individuals at 4:30 in the morning and committed these sexual assaults. Additionally, as he fled and officers responded, our on-scene investigation identified that there were a total of 4 of these hot prowl burglaries that occurred. And our detectives worked along with Technical Investigation Division continuously day and night, and were able to identify the individual we believe responsible through latent prints and other information. A crime bulletin was broadcasted, and on the 5th of July, senior lead officers assigned to the West Valley area were able to identify the individual responsible as he was living in a tent and nearby. This individual and his arrest, I'm grateful for the efforts of those officers. The individual that was identified as a Mario Orozco, O-R-O-Z-C-O, male Hispanic, and he's approximately 31 years of age. He was booked for lewd acts involving a child, as well as the burglaries. This individual has an extensive criminal history, including prior sexual assault and lewd conduct convictions in the past. The second event occurred in an adjoining area of the city in the Devonshire area. There, on the 1st of July, a woman came home to her apartment, and hours later, at about 10 o'clock, while she's inside, she was grabbed from behind and she was strangled and sexually assaulted. Over the course of the next few hours, she was assaulted both sexually as well as physically, with being grabbed and punched as the individual burglarized the home. He later left the residence, and the victim was able to call the police, and we responded. The responding officers and detectives conducted an extensive crime scene investigation, which results in the discovery of surveillance footage via a Ring video showing the individual responsible walking about the complex. It also was able, through the video, to give an image of him involving his identity as well as distinctive hair style, as well as a tattoo of a J symbol on his right hand. The video clearly showed the individual's dreadlocks, but the tattoo is barely visible or noticeable on the video. Detectives initiated a search warrant that included entering the victim's vehicle that was stolen from the scene into our automated vehicle want system. Approximately 8 hours later, detectives were notified that Simi Valley Police Department had located the vehicle and detained an individual that we believe is responsible for this event. This individual was identified as Cedric Tinsley. He was an individual that is a male black that is on parole for assault with a deadly weapon and has prior felony convictions for narcotic and weapon violations. The district attorney's office has reviewed this case and filed multiple sexual assault charges against him, as well as the burglary and grand theft investigation. I bring these up to the public's awareness because as we enter in the summer months, we know that the heat is upon us and that LA residents are going to struggle to find ways to sleep and to get the necessary rest in the challenging heat conditions. We would ask that individuals be mindful that there are those that are predators and that will prey upon as opportunities to see these open residences or these screens or open windows, and to be, again, mindful of that and to take that into consideration as they go about their day. Also, we recognize and ask that the residents in these communities call out and call the police and individuals when they see prowlers or individuals that may be wandering about these multi-residential units, recognizing that some may be on an evening walk, but others may be acting as a means of an opportunist to commit this type of heinous crime. Two other issues I want to briefly bring about. One is an arson that occurred at City Hall on the 8th of July. There, in the evening hours, a lone individual took what we believe is to be a rag and doused it in gasoline and then threw it through a second-story window, starting a fire. Fortunately, the fire control systems, LA Fire, as well as Security Services Division personnel were able to respond and quickly put out the fire and ensure the safety of the building. I'm proud of the work of Security Services Division personnel, the investigators that responded, and the images that were captured by CCTV cameras. Was able to identify an individual and clothing. The next day, we had Security Service Division actually identify the individual wearing the same clothing and still in possession of a gas can. He was arrested, and we are seeking his prosecution for that arson attack. Lastly, and this is troubling in that it is similar to an incident that occurred across the country this past week and a half, involving the instances of multiple victims being shot by a lone gunman. We had a similar event occur here in the Hollenbeck area this past weekend, involving a lone individual who ultimately shot at 7 different individuals and injured, fortunately, 4, but those injuries did not result in anyone losing their life. Let me get my notes here for a moment. This happened in the Lincoln Heights area, and what essentially began at about 6 o'clock in the morning was a lone male Hispanic was in a vehicle, brandished a rifle, and began at instances across the next few hours, not just pointing that rifle at individuals, but shooting at individuals and striking them. He made some odd remarks during these encounters with individuals that were not interrelated. They did not know each other. No one knew this individual. Our officers quickly identified that this was a pattern. I'm proud of their work, the leadership team from Hollenbeck, as well as Central Bureau, that assembled additional patrol units and airship and alerted the CHP and surrounding agencies to the instances of these repeated brandishings and assault with deadly weapon and attempt murder instances. Their work, just a few hours later, were able to identify the vehicle nearby and resulted in the arrest, we believe, of the individual responsible. In that arrest also was the recovery of a high-powered rifle with an extended magazine, ammunition, narcotics, as well as a cache of money. The individual has an extensive criminal history, and it appears that this motive for this was some type of delusion or narcotic crisis because of while taking methamphetamines. That was also recovered from the vehicle. We don't see a terrorist relationship to this. We've not identified any hate motivation. It appears to be a random and yet entirely senseless, but very concerning attack that occurred. Again, I want to thank the men and women of the Los Angeles Police Department for their quick response, for the diligence in their investigative efforts, and their vigilance that resulted in the quick identification and capture of this individual. Lastly, in regards to our sworn personnel strength, we stand at 9,027 sworn personnel. That's a reduction of 28 from our last report. Our last academy class began on a week ago Monday. It has 32 new recruits, which is well below our goal of 60. As a reminder to our public, we are hiring and looking for qualified individuals that can come into the organization and make the difference in regards to the safety of Los Angeles. Civilian personnel stand at 2,644. That's an increase of 9 additional personnel from our last report. We still are 254 civilian personnel underdeployed. We have 442 reserve officers. I'm grateful for their work this past holiday weekend. A number of them were deployed across various posts within the city, which allowed us to increase our visibility and ensure the safety of those that are celebrating our nation's independence. Lastly, we have 2,298 civilian volunteers. Again, another set of eyes and ears and helping hands in regards to providing for the safety of the city. That concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Calanche, any questions for Chief Moore?
Just a quick question. Regarding Miss Jessica Brown, you mentioned that there's follow-up investigation regarding mental health or homelessness or other issues. Who is getting that information? What's the process for that?
So let me clarify. I have not identified, and I do not believe that Ms. Brown was experiencing homelessness. We do believe that she resided in the area. And as far as based on our very preliminary investigation involving Ms. Brown, we do believe that she has been a recipient of prior services, mental health services, from the Department of Mental Health and or Department of Children and Family Services. So we are already working with those agencies to understand those services and what they were and how she was being provided for her needs.
So who conducts that? I don't want to say investigation, but who gathers that information? Like who takes the lead on that? Is it FID or?
It'll be Force Investigations Division working in concert with the Mental Evaluation Unit and our Family Support Unit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Calanche. Commissioner Shields, any questions for Chief Moore?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Chief, for the report and highlighting some of the really great, diligent investigative efforts of the department to arrest some of the violent crime that you spoke about. One question that I have that wasn't directly in the report, and so it may be something that requires a later discussion or later report. There was a report in the LA Times relating to the former LAPD officer who, made allegations of racial profiling and left the department. I'm wondering, 2 things. One, how does the department deal with whistleblower type complaints? And also, what type of training is provided by the department, both in the academy and out of the academy, relating to racial profiling and bias policing?
Sure. So I'm aware of the public report, and there is an active Professional Standards Bureau Internal Affairs investigation into his allegations regarding his detention and the appropriateness of the officer's actions. That is an ongoing investigation. As to whistleblower aspect of his assertions that of his other conduct of what he saw, witnessed, or observed, or experienced as a member of the organization, part of that investigation will include his account of that, and we'll take that investigation where the facts allow us to, as to investigating assertions that he would make about others within the organization and their conduct, as well as his. Regarding the aspect of this investigation, it'll be overseen by Professional Standards Bureau, Deputy Chief Mike Rinkunis, but also Director Elizabeth Rhodes from Office of Constitutional Policing and Policy, relative to the claims and assertions of retaliation or discrimination against him.
And one additional
Oh,
thing.
I'm sorry,
was
training.
The training.
Yeah,
yes.
my apologies. So regarding bias policing, first of all, our effort in regards to this is to recognize that bias exists amongst all of us. In our training and our development of our individuals, whether they're the youngest member of the organization or one of the oldest, is that how are we reminding and providing training and development of our personnel to recognize their own inherent biases, whether they be explicit or implicit, and the tools and strategies in which to not just recognize those, but ensure that their conduct, they go about their work as a police officer, conforms with the constitutional policing standards of this organization. That they recognize that their implicit biases could or may have an influence on decisions that they make, and that they ensure that they look at those decisions within the lens of not just their own self-articulation, but to ensure that their basis of their decision is based on behaviors and not stereotypes, based on actual facts and not beliefs or opinions relative to their life experience. That training is delivered on a regular basis, both in the regards to the academy training, but also at every stage of training, whether it be field officer training, it would be supervisors, command development, it was in roll call training. It is a frequent and ongoing series of rolling topics that we go across this entire agency with.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Shields. Commissioner Suthers.
Thank you, President Briggs. Chief, thank you for the report this morning. Just have one question. Is there any update on the joint investigation by Major Crimes and LA Fire Department on the July 6th cross-burning hate crime at the Sylmar Christian Fellowship Church?
Yes, so on the 6th, we had 3 wooden crosses that were set afire that were in the front of that location. The Major Crimes Division, as part of the House of Worship team, responded with LA Fire, Arson, ATF. I will also say that efforts with the ministry of the church, as well as with San Fernando Police Department Chief Fabian Valdez, is to continue outreach to the churches and houses in the northeastern part of the San Fernando Valley. To this point, we don't believe that hate crime, arson, is related to any other arsons anywhere in the larger region. That's based on not just our review, but we've worked with our Joint Regional Intelligence Center to survey the entire region for any similar fire attack on any house of worship. Secondly, we are also we are calling together the ministers within that area to sit down with them and to brief them on the status of the investigation. I have no arrest to be announced. I don't have a physical description of the individual or individuals, but we also want to dispel rumors, and we want to address concerns that this is the seriousness in which we're approaching this.
Thank you, Commissioner Suthers. At this time, we're going to go to public comment. Madam Secretary, please call the first speaker.
Okay, our first speaker is Mike Greenspan. For 3 minutes.
Mike Greenspan. Oh, it's good to be here. And over here, even if it is the Caruso campaign headquarters. Oh, where's Stevie? Stevie Soberoff. Oh, I guess he's going to be another Caruso and try to get a 40% absentee rate. Anyway, 4A, I think it is, about real estate fraud protection grant. Yes. Would conflict of interest come under that? Because one of your commissioners, Stevie Soberoff, had a conflict of interest. He was supposed to be finding sites for schools while on a Prop BB repair committee. And guess what? He pulled out his real estate license and sold the Van Nuys Drive-In to good old Christian businessman Bert Bachman of Galpin. Oh yeah, we got Christian fucked by Bert Galpin, community activist. Isn't that wonderful? Yes, that is fraud. He was supposed to do one thing, but he profited. Now, Medal of Valor. I gotta mention that, folks. You don't know how much. Gee, Didn't you guys forget somebody? Mitchell Englander, your part-time pig. He was on city council, 2 heartbeats away from being mayor. And guess what? He was taking bribes on the Plum Committee. Money bribes, hotel room bribes, liquor bill bribes, pussy bribes. Isn't that wonderful? Shouldn't people like that have badges? Well, he did. He probably still does. Slap, slap on the wrist. He only got 4 months in some country club prison in Arizona. Kind of an Arizona version of what we look at in Florida's Eglin Air Force Base. Bring your golf clubs. Well, you guys really do a fuck-up job. How else could I describe it? Every time I see you guys, there's always something going on. And all I can say, you have officers like Englander. No wonder people don't want to be members of the LAPD. Hey, Furman was right when he said years ago to those people, don't apply to LAPD. I mean, you've got Englanders. I mean, look at Englander. He was right there at that building next door. And the federal prosecutor was describing him with his escort masseuse. And then his wife was holding his hand afterward. And I remember hollering, looky there, his wife's holding his hand. The hand that rubbed his escort's pussy in Las Vegas. Yes, we need more police officers like Englander, don't we? Well, I'm sure glad one thing, Soberoff's not here today. I hope he doesn't come back.
Next, we have caller ending 1264.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yes, Chief. I was, yes, this was on Sunday. I called the police because we had a person that was disturbing the peace. And it's an ongoing situation with this house. And I tried to, I've emailed the captain at Foothill Division and the community policing about it beforehand because I knew it was going to happen, just to kind of alert them. And we ended up having a situation where the person that lives there came and threw eggs at my house. And this was at 3 in the morning. They had the party going on very loud, disturbing all the residents, and had kids there. Kids also playing till 3 in the morning. I mean, this is ridiculous, and I don't understand why they can't do something about it. Also had the officers come out on Sunday morning, that same day, to file a report. Evidently, they said they called me. I have no missed calls. I have no messages like they said they left. And they obviously just sat in the car and then didn't see anybody come out and just left. What does it take to 30 seconds to get out of the car and come to the house and say, hey, you know, we showed up and we wanted to let you know that we came by. But nothing. So, I mean, this is a situation that we really need to start rectifying. And they're not issuing the ACE citations for these kind of situations. Because what happens is sometimes, especially in our community, where people come by and they don't let them into the party and then it turns into a shootout. I mean, we really need to start being proactive to keep our community safe. I don't know how many times I can say this. I mean, anytime you have people coming from the outside invading the community, whether it be through illegal vending or just gangs coming in, taking over. Of course, we've got gangs that are actually holding up a lot of these vendors now, I hear. So we need to really, really get on the ACE program and start issuing citations to let them know that you're serious, because it has become a game. And I don't know if the police officers are trying to be ambassadors instead of law enforcement, but whatever it is they're doing is not working. And we're also having a lot of people that are actually loitering in the situation, which they seem to be doing something about. But that's all I have for now. Thank you, and have a great day. Bye.
Next, we have Mr. Herman.
So we're looking at item F here on the so-called consent, and I don't see anything well about this day for Valor because, as you heard by the prior constituent that spoke about Englander, big-eared dwarf, stupid motherfucker from Los Angeles that went to Arizona and did a federal time, proves to us that a dirty nigger exists in Los Angeles, and Englander was one of them. Isn't that pathetic and sad? I think so. How dare you allow some asshole like that go about with valor, carry a concealed weapon, and then participates, just like on your dumb shit here on Fat Cow Moo Moo Rodriguez, item F, existing protocol identifying the responding new street drugs. Well, there's nothing new about drugs. We all know what fucking drugs do. The problem is you don't stop the border from bringing them in. That's why a dirty nigger of the 46th
Sir,
president.
stop saying that word. If you don't stop saying
Sir.
that word, I'm going to have you removed immediately.
Sir, I'm going to go to my non-agenda public comment since you're becoming very hypothetically violent with me. All right? Non-agenda
Say
public
the
comment.
word one more time and you'll be removed.
I'm going to read Brandenburg versus Ohio, U.S. 395, 444, 1969 into the record, motherfucker, because that's my right. And no one's going to regulate my free speech based on some bullshit because you're offended by the N-word. You shouldn't be offended by the N-word because some of your officers use it on the public. So Brandenburg versus Ohio, I will read it politely and gently and sensitive for your ears, motherfucker. How far is the nigger going to? Yeah.
Sir,
This is what
you've
we're going to do to the
ended your
niggers,
public
a dirty
comment period
niggers.
at this time. Please stop talking and leave the room.
Sir, I am reading Brandenburg
Officers, please remove this gentleman from the room.
on my non-agenda public comment time. Mr. Attorney, clarify this because the former two fucking attorneys got in trouble for covering up bullshit.
Sir, please leave the room.
So I'm turning this into
Please,
the record.
Sergeant at Arms, please have this gentleman removed from the room.
Search for the record. I do got 31 seconds left. Thank you. Dumb motherfucker. Dumb motherfucker. I gotta get my stuff now.
Next, we have Elisa Avalos.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
All of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I would like to start off by saying thank you to everyone that's there. I feel that it was a waste of time for the chief of police to have to attend a buyback fireworks because we still had a lot of fireworks. But the most important thing that I want to talk about is about 2 months ago, I saw a little boy at a corner naked. I called 911 and let them know no officers, nobody was around for 10 minutes. The family member came back. I followed them to their house and there was 3 kids under the age of 5 naked. I called 911 back and they told me, should we send somebody or not? That's out of the question. They shouldn't be asking that. No one ever called me back also to let me know if anything happened or not, or ask me questions. I had to call the police station myself. That's very disappointing. Now, it's going on a month ago. My best friend's daughters almost got assaulted by this man that's been assaulting a lot of people in Vaughn Charter and around this neighborhood in Pacoima on Judge Street. He followed them home. They called 911. They were on hold. I want to thank Deputy Chief Hamilton because I called him and he got us the resources that we need. But this is not okay. And we need to have Mark Ross more An hour a week is not enough. He does a really good job, and because of him and the teamwork with the community and the officers at the Angel Gardens, our crime rate has been going down, but you guys took them away from us and it's going back up. Now, there is no way sometimes that I can reach my senior leads when I need help or assistance or even ask them a question. Why? Because they're being sent somewhere else. That is not okay. Now, another thing, I want to thank all of the officers in the Angel Gardens because they're doing a really good job, but you guys need to do more communication, do more outreach. Now, the officers that we have, it's not enough, especially in the summer that the crime rate's going up. And it's not okay. And it's not all right for Monica Rodriguez to be backpedaling, saying, I want to defund the police officers. Oh, no, I want to give them money. And it's not okay that she took Captain Smith and Caesar away from what they were doing. It's not okay because I don't feel comfortable with my new captain talking to him for what? So he can yell at me again in public? I don't think so. That's not right. And I just want to thank all of the officers. If no one thanks you guys, thank you for putting your life on the line for us. Thank you. Have a nice
Thank you. Next, we have Red Chief Hunt.
Hello? Yes, can you put the time on? That president who just kicked him out for saying nigger, the case Hunt versus the city of Los Angeles was called Fuck White Niggers Too. Also won in federal court. If you don't believe me, ask the city attorney. What you did was absolutely wrong. Whether we whether we like it or not, fuck white niggers too, meaning also TOO.
Sir, I'm going to admonish you to stop using that word.
Well, no. That's my case, sir. This is my case law. You can check it out in federal court. We won that fuck white niggas too in federal court. The right to say that. Dow versus the city of Los Angeles, we actually, Stephen Rhodey and them, we actually won. You check it out with the city attorney. Check it out with the head top of city attorney. Check it out with Michael Moore. Check it out with him. All these guys that's been here know that case passed constitutional muster challenge. Now you want to be in conflict with Stephen Rhodey, the president of the ACLU? Hey, he will take you to the cleaners, and I'll have another check in my account because that case did pass constitutional challenge. Now check it out with your city attorney. Not that I want to use that word, or not that I allow anybody else to use it, but two meaning also, meaning that there's niggas in all different races. No. But no, that meaning that there's all, it's just not white, black, or anything. If you want to check it out, try me out, 1983, and that was Hunt versus the city of Los Angeles, the right to due process. What you're doing is you're processing the law wrong. Don't admonish somebody for their language. Admonish them for saying it too long, North versus white. Now you can't repeatedly say it just constantly one after another, but that's the law. I mean, and I'm explaining it to you very lightly because I'm in this room, and the check for $215,000 was pretty nice. The check was for $270,000 was really nice, and that's because my constitutional violations was violated. So I, hopefully that you respectfully, and it's all in LA Times too. Michael Hunt or KKK LA Times. Michael Hunt versus the city of Los Angeles. You should read the article because one guy got in a whole bunch of trouble for doing the same thing. Mike, community-based policing. The people are police officers. We need 7,000 police officers and 3,000 social workers. A lot of these problems that we're having is social issues because they retarded and they high off PCP and drugs and stuff like that. You need to start recognizing that, for everybody in here, I don't have nothing bad to say, but follow the law.
Next, we have Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers, you're on.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have to. Oh, all items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yeah, I have to say I'm shocked that the police commission president doesn't know the law and doesn't understand that 3 minutes of public comment, according to the rules, as long as they're not attacking other people, they're allowed to say whatever they want to say and use whatever language they'd like to use. So I think that the commissioner doesn't understand his job. I'm calling on him to resign. He's either unable or unwilling to perform his job. And so that's what I'm going to call for. Many times this meeting has been disrupted by people who go beyond the 3 minutes or outside the 3 minutes, and he refuses to enforce 403 PC of the penal code, which I've cited numerous times. You have a chief of police sitting there not doing anything, and you have the sergeant at arms just escorting people out, the usual suspects, week after week. So let's get it together, and hopefully you don't sustain a lawsuit based on your violation of people's First Amendment rights. I don't agree with what's said, but he has the right to say it. Now, that we're wasting time on that. I have to say, thank God that the officers in the 2 OISs were unhurt. That's great news. I noticed there wasn't much information about who Jessica Brown was in terms of a criminal history. That would be good to know. And also maybe post her picture. There may be unreported crimes out there. The other issue is City Hall arson. You have a suspect who there's no information provided at all on an arson suspect. And we know that arson suspects are hard to apprehend, and it might be useful if you had some more information on that person. He might be a local, a regular that's committed other arson. So let's get that information out there to the public. And what you have basically is a problem with communication. You have volunteers that are going to be having a summit. That's great. You need more volunteers. You need more effective community policing. Thank you to all the officers that do their job on a daily basis, despite all the constraints and all the challenges and difficulties. With only 9,027 officers, the number is going down. Crime is going up. The stresses on them is increasing, I'm sure. So let's remember them in our prayers. And Commissioner Suthers, thank you for mentioning that Christian church that was victimized by an arsonist in the form of a hate crime. I don't know why Moore didn't bring it up. On certain things, he's very good at bringing them up. For example, the LGBTQ, whatever, pride is a sin. Thank God Pride Month is over. Why don't we have the clergy councils actually working with the police, all different faiths, trying to help the public and public safety? I think that would be great. And for those of you who are talking, remember 403 PC should be arrested for it.
Next, we have Jonathan Foster.
Mr. Foster, please come up.
I watched him put his card in before me. How come he's not called already? You want to go before me? All right. You sure? Because you were here before me. Hi, I guess the Zoom circus of the OIS of 04022. The guy shot 18 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Come on! It's not 93! It's 2023! I thought we were getting out of that!
If they've come out this way, they should have an opportunity to speak.
It'll be taken up in the executive. And it's 45 minutes. I'm not answering your question, sir. No one is going to answer your questions.
I mean, this is just nuts. That I can't speak on every item. We're going July 4th, and you know what they died for? You know what they died for? Not your shaved head telling me I can't speak on every item. You go die, jerk.
Thank you, Mr. Foster.
Die. Is that a threat? Is that a threat? Is that a threat? It's not a threat. We're going July 4th, and you know what they died for? Not your shaved head. No, it's not a threat. It's a prayer. It's a hope. An encouragement that you should sign up and fight a war and die like a soldier who died instead. They all died truthfully for what is becoming a lie right before our eyes. a deep feeling, a wish that you died for something that after you died, what you thought you died for, a good LAPD, a safe Los Angeles. You died for this, a constitution of freedom, justice. And after you died, the people didn't care about what you died for, that you die instead. Of course, Steve Soboroff doesn't get this because he's stupid. They didn't observe, they ran on some other principles that is not something that if you knew that it was a lie, you would not have given your life for it. That's why I said that. And I'm here to speak about the ADL, which will be very difficult to get to. Some of the things that are very alarming is that they said there was something about extremism in law enforcement, and there was immediate discipline because one of these organizations gave the LAPD, and more has been on the law, whatever the thing was now right here. But what I noticed is the George Floyd Valentines, nobody got fired. But if somebody posts something they don't like, something about Jewish, they get fired. But the guy with the George Floyd Valentines didn't get fired. He talked about the black community and the Jewish community are all together. Well, it's the Jews who brought the slaves here. I mean, I got a lot. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages on this ADL thing. It is a bunch of lies, just a bunch of lies in that.
Next, we have T.
Hello,
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
all of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
So, there's a total hypocrisy with Briggs' opening statement about public comment because you let people go on and on and on about items that aren't even on an agenda, that are utterly racist and hateful. It is not okay to say the N-word, and it's not protected under the First Amendment. It's actually hate speech. So it happened the last meeting, it happened this meeting, but it's pretty appalling. You let the guy say it 3 and 4 and 5 times before you threw him out. Just disgusting. All right. And it happened again the last meeting, and that guy wasn't even reprimanded or thrown out. It's hate speech. Okay. Period. Shouldn't be allowed. Secondly, Miss Brown that y'all killed, mental health is a crisis. And it's real telling how, a white supremacist can go and shoot up a store full of people, of black folks, a church full of black folks, a school with children, and these white supremacists get taken to McDonald's. They get taken into custody real carefully. Like nobody was fearful for their life after a white supremacist murders X amount of black folks. But y'all can't find a way to deal with people in mental health crises here that aren't wielding a gun versus a phone versus a pocket knife versus a metal pipe. Mental health service workers should be responding to these calls. Why is mental health end up a death sentence in every situation y'all face? You all don't prevent anything. You just mentioned a guy that went in like 5 different windows, including a child's window. You never prevent anything. You always show up after the fact, and then you react. And it often is somebody's life that's taken, right? It's unacceptable. We need you out of traffic. We need you out of mental health. Let's talk about the fireworks real quick. So you had a buyback, but you blew up a neighborhood in South LA the last 4th of July, and those people are still recovering. They're still displaced. Ozzie Hutchinson and Ramon Reyes died as a result to your botched up, horrible PR campaign. In the 45 minutes, we need a neutral place to meet, right? This is a city of 4 million people. The same 5 people that y'all let on here is, we need.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have A. Graebner.
all items. Starting off with the chief's report. The chief is not special. The chief should get 3 minutes like everyone else. If the chief exceeds 3 minutes, we should be able to match his time. He took like 15 minutes, like 20 minutes today. So, that should tell you about how much time we should all individually get. Regardless of how long the chief speaks, everyone should be able to speak. It seems like the language that's being used to describe when the police shoot and kill someone's getting more and more ridiculous. Like you're not even. You say, well, this caused the shooting. What caused the shooting was the cop decided to pull the trigger and shoot someone. That is what caused the shooting. And it was the police shooting someone. Officer-involved shooting is ambiguous as to what the officer's involvement was in the shooting. And sure, yeah, most people do know what you mean by that now. It still just kind of goes to show how much what kind of your priorities are, what you think of this incident, how you're going to view it. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. I oppose all these donations. Why is the volunteer summit $5,200? That's like really expensive for like a party. You have donations for all these wellness days. That's just ridiculous. The police foundation is funding all these terrible things, and it's just a backdoor way for the corporations to fund these, these things without actually, just additional funding, since apparently you don't have enough from the like $3 billion you already get every year, plus all the extra stuff you have. You have these awards for the Medal of Valor. All these things that sound like they're just like propaganda. You're giving a medal to cops who shot and killed someone. So you're giving medals to killer cops, who were really violent. I watched the body cam footage. I didn't get to say this because you didn't let me speak last time, but there were some really xenophobic things happening during the chief's report last time. All this thing about you saying, oh, well, people are just coming in from Chile to commit crimes. Like, what do you have against, that's just really xenophobic. You're just saying the same kind of things that, it's just you're just trying to create this rhetoric, and it's really just terrible.
Next, we have Michael C.
Good morning. I'd like to thank all of the good officers of the LAPD, because there are some still left. Thank God Anal Sex Pride Month is over. We're all tired of that. No city building or government building should ever raise that homosexual flag. We're all sick of seeing it. It's just a disgusting display. I don't fall under that flag. I'm an American. I'm a combat veteran. I fall under the American flag because I support America. I don't support anal sex. Nobody's free speech should ever be quelled, even if I don't agree with it. And the interruptions that we're hearing even now should be held accountable legally. Why are these people being arrested like they're supposed to be for disrupting a public meeting? We're all tired of that kind of garbage too, because they show up, they get to fire their mouth off. That's not how this works. When is the investigation of the Mattera statue being torn down by a radical, indigenous, in quotes, group going to be solved? But never. That wasn't a good enough crime to solve because it's Catholic. Yeah, of course it's not. May the Lord have mercy on you all, City Council, and all of us in LA. After that month of pride, we really need the mercy of God. It's pretty obvious. I yield my time.
Okay. Next, we have Jason Reedy.
Yes, Papa. All right, Chief Moore, how many LAPD pigs were present this weekend to see off President Trump? Your beloved president. None? Zero? None? I'm asking because right outside in your headquarters, right here in the lobby, there was a sticker displayed of Trump alongside Reagan in military garb. The same Trump that got a medical deferment from the draft, during the Vietnam War because of quote unquote bone spurs in his feet. Any comment on why your officers are displaying a sticker of Trump in your headquarters?
Sir, we don't go back and forth like this, okay? So thank you. You can ask some questions, I'm not gonna answer them.
Oh, you're fucking dumb. All right, 3C. It's interesting that $20,000 grant from the criminal enterprise known as the Los Angeles Police Foundation, yes, would have Deputy Chief Mark Reyna describe its anticipated long-term impacts as more officers graduating the academy, filling patrol cars, and serving the community for the next 30 years. If that's the case, y'all don't need any more money for recruitment. Marketing at military bases, nothing like recruiting the people who murdered black and brown people abroad to come and murder black and brown people here in the city of Los Angeles. Need I remind this commission how Joseph Zizzo, a murdering Marine, stole the life of Takar Smith just in January of this year. 3B, the fact that LAPD would seek retroactive approval to apply for and accept a $850,000 grant award to quote-unquote educate the public regarding the dangers of impaired driving, but the public won't get education about the dangers of LAPD driving. My baby is old enough to remember that in December 2022, 7 LAPD officers were arrested for DUI. In a department-wide bulletin, LAPD brass wrote that half of those arrested for DUI had a blood alcohol level of more than twice the legal limit, and that several of those incidents resulted in crashes or injuries, crashes with injuries. What happened to the secret commission vote lowering the acceptable blood alcohol level for an off-duty officer to 0.04% in some situations? Do those situations include right after clocking out of work? Didn't you have an LAPD pig that was at least 15 beers deep fire his gun, nearly striking another pig from another agency? So much for that Blue Lives Matter shit. And then crash his car into a garage? When speaking on the 7 DUI arrests of your pigs, the department stated that those arrests were in addition to the many other alcohol and drug-related incidents involving our department personnel throughout the year. Look at the LAPD's disciplinary records over the last 2 months released. Yes, Papa. You'll see a 5-day suspension for an off-duty pig who drove drunk, without a license, fired his weapon while inside his vehicle, and then fled the scene. You have another 5-day suspension for an on-duty pig who failed to conduct a DUI investigation. I wonder who he let off. Probably another LAPD officer. And finally, you had a 22-day suspension for an off-duty pig who was arrested for DUI resulting in a traffic collision. Again, the objectives of this grant is to reduce everything related to DUI by 5%, but this department has shown that they can't even reduce DUI within its own department by 5%.
Thank you, Mr. Reedy. Thank you, Mr. Reedy. Let's go to the next speaker.
Mr. Reedy, I'll have you speak. Mr. Reedy, if you'll pay attention, do you want me to respond to you or not? Well, then let me respond. There's a sergeant in the back. Show him that image. We'll investigate your allegation. Thank you. Have a good day.
Let's go to the next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Javier Hermosillo. Javier Hermosillo, you're on.
Well, am I honored that the other person's still speaking? Hello.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
Well, hi. Can I speak yet, or is that?
Mr. Reedy, please stop disrupting the meeting.
Oh, I'll wait. Kindly hold my time. Mr. President, I know that you're trying to be as giving of people's rights and time. And I'm not sure what's in the water this weekend that has prompted just about every speaker to address this board and those of us in the community who are listening to such ugly, vile, racist, sexist, probably everything except homophobic comments. That, you know what? Be quiet. This isn't your time. This is my time.
Members of the audience, please let Mr. Calanche finish.
Can you please hold my time since obviously uh, there's this great distraction here and nobody's listening? Thank you very much. I would ask, Mr. President, that the commission
Please put 30
consider.
seconds back on his time.
Thank you, sir. I would suggest that the commission, in concert with the city attorney, consider without infringing on somebody's free speech rights. There has to be decorum here. Those of us in the city of Los Angeles, especially those of us who've been here our entire life, born and raised here, and know the need for law enforcement and know the great work that the LAPD has done, and it's little scars, it's mistakes, it's problem areas. There is no organization that is free of people that do the wrong thing, and that's why you have internal investigations. That's why you have the district attorney's office, the city attorney, and all the others that conduct the investigations. And I see no purpose in continuing to allow people whose free speech is really hate speech. And I would ask the commission and the city attorney to take a look at that issue, because there is a vast difference between free speech and hate speech. And week after week, and today has been probably one of the worst days in years that I've heard. And, we ask our police officers to do a very difficult job. We ask the chief and his command staff to, keep everybody, in line, so to speak, trained properly and treat the public properly. And then we have to listen to this garbage at a meeting that is supposed to be a communication link between you, the commission, and the community. And so, I'm still going to be here, but I think it does a great disservice to the department, to the people of the community who care about this department and who at times file complaints, as I have, to have this kind of circus go on. I thank you so much for your support and the added time that you gave me. Have a nice day.
Next, we have Michael.
So every time I come up here, I'm always going to advocate for y'all to make the great decision for the city of Los Angeles and fire this idiot, because he constantly does things and says things that are nonsensical, do not make sense. He double talks himself, and he's always up here talking about crime statistics and things that are going outside of his department, which he cannot control, but won't talk about all the things that are going on in his department that he can control. Let's talk about it. In the last 4 months, there's been 3 different LAPD officers that have been charged with sexual assault. 3. One was a former LAPD officer. 2 were active LAPD officers. 1 was on a cold case. So they had information and had DNA that was backlogged, because guess what? LAPD doesn't do rape kits, right? They backlogged, and now they just found out just last month that they had an LAPD officer who had raped someone whose DNA was connected to raping someone. Also, let's look at a article from last year, not even really last year, just a couple months ago, December 9th, 2022. It says, out of 4 departments, New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Police Department, $40 million were spent on payouts for officer-on-officer sexual abuse cases. This report looked over 60 different cases in 5 years. That's in your department. So you want to talk about people in tents climbing through people's windows, and you want to tell people about that? How about you give a public service announcement to tell them stay away from your police officers? How about you tell your officers, the women officers in your department, to say, hey, y'all, be careful around your male counterparts, because the likelihood is that they're going to attack you. they're going to assault you. That is a high probability if you put on a badge and a gun and wear the uniform. How about you tell your new recruits that? Explain that to them. Because you're full of shit. That's why you're not going to say it. Because all you do is sit up here and do PR and double talk and double speak. You don't actually say anything. You're a chief spin, chief PR, chief talk. Because that's all you do. You don't change anything for the better. Last thing I want to point out is, again, last year, November, just a couple months ago, last year, there was an article that reported that an LAPD captain tipped off a CBS executive about a rape complaint filed against him. Did you say that in your chief's report when that came out? I doubt it. Because you don't control your officers. Do that first, then worry about other people.
Next, we have GOAT.
Yes. All the items and general public comment.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yes, that's right. Yes, and good morning, humans. I'm glad to see we're having such an amicable meeting this morning. And we'll get to the police chief's report. He forgot to tell you the good news. Yes, over in Tarzana, on the corner of Reseda and Burbank, the pipe wielder was taken down by LAPD. Hitting people with those pipes, scaring people, ruining businesses. Now, Goat Puppet went by here today at the corner of Tarzana and Reseda, and everybody has a smile on their face, knowing that LAPD did their job and put down this dog. Let's give everybody a hand. Oh, I didn't know about that. Yes. And then we go down 3 blocks more. The rapist, the Reseda rapist. Again, Mitchell Moore got into his city-paid car, drove down to Etowanda and Van Owen and said, enough is enough. Clean this shit up. And they caught the rapist. Let's give him a hand again. Wow. Yes, that's right. So as you see, Mitchell Moore is paying more attention to the valley. Well, why is that? Oh, well, somebody has a secret recording. Apparently, a police report was filed regarding a trespass. And then there was a subsequent burglary at the same premises. And an LAPD detective called the precipient witness. Yes, T-Fang, yes, you know about this, don't you? Well, your chief doesn't know. Yes, and then they said, oh, you mean there was another break-in? Did you arrest the people? No, they got away, and they got away when they were trapped by the precipient witness in a shed. There was no way with 9 police officers. How could 2 people get away in broad daylight? Let's give them a thumbs down. Boo, that's right, yes. So we would like to know, where is the pretty young lady and her tattooed friend? Who are they? And why were they breaking into that particular person's home? Yes, some people say the owner's mentally retarded. I disagree. Some people say the owner is a piece of shit. Again, I disagree. But all we want, and you can drop it off on a note or a business card, is the names of the 2 people who broke into that particular residence, so that the Goat Puppet investigation team could continue its fine work in the San Fernando Valley and San Fernando City. And now we will go into the general public comment period. Yes, you've heard a lot.
Okay, next we have Gina Viola.
And this will be the last speaker.
Hi, my name's Harriet Elliott. My last name, maiden name is Gammon. My dad was George Garrison Gammon, who was the head of Child Protective Services. He had as much power as Kenny Hahn. My dad was not arrogant, and he one time told me, I'm as powerful in the county as Kenny Hahn. He is, okay? However, my dad, like all of you, is a moderate. And when my son was killed, he went to the funeral, And guess what? He didn't tell me, you need to get an investigator right now, okay? My mother had already died, okay? My mother wouldn't have done that, okay? Now, I'm getting a letter from Michael Moore saying in 2020, I started an investigation with Sergeant McCool, okay? His friend, a woman, her name was Detective Swanson. I want to see their names on it. Mr. Moore is saying that he already said that there's no different, my classification, my allegation that employees made inconsistent statements is wrong. Okay, first of all, for 20 years, I never saw Detective Tinker's statement. Detective Tinker said it was kept out of the autopsy, and it said, we know what, somebody called your son out of the party, a 17-year-old, by the way. No alcohol, no drugs. That's an amazing kid at a party at 10 to 24 at night. That is really amazing, 10:24. We called, anyway, someone called him out and then shot him. Well, here's another allegation, not allegation, inconsistent statement. Detective Johnson always told me that there was a shooting from outside the party. Of course, if my mom would have been there alive when my son died, she would have said, get a investigator. He was lying the whole time. Detective Johnson was lying. Yeah. So I want to see Sergeant McCool's statement, okay? I think he wouldn't have even started the investigation if it was all resolved. Yeah. So I want to see this. Here is name, Sergeant McCool, and Detective Swanson was a white woman. He's black. And I want to see their names attached to it, what they did. I think he was going to do something. And if it had been already resolved, he would have not let me talk to them. They recorded me for 30 minutes. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to go to the consent agenda items. Public comment has ended now. The 45-minute time period has ended. I will ask that everyone who is speaking presently stop speaking, or I'll ask you to leave the room. Public comment period has ended.
You said you thought we should speak. Commissioner Shields, do you think this is what you joined this board to do, to make sure that the public who came down to give...
I will ask that you stop disrupting the meeting. At this point, you are disrupting the meeting. The gentleman in the glasses and the hat is disrupting the meeting at present. I'm going to ask that you stop.
You're supposed to represent us. How do you know my name on some weeks but not others? Just like
I will ask that you stop disrupting the meeting.
Just like other weeks.
Sir, please leave the meeting now.
You make it up as you go.
Sergeant of Arms, please escort him from the meeting. Please call the Sergeant of Arms.
Now there's 45 minutes before the entire meeting for everybody to speak on everything that's going to be in that meeting. Commissioners, is this what you came here to do? Are you proud of being on this board that does this?
Please escort Mr. Sherman out of the meeting at this time. Ms. Viola, please stop disrupting the meeting. I will ask that you escort Mr. Sherman and Ms. Viola out of the meeting at this time.
And then you gave 3 more minutes to racist defenders. Right. It's going to take you longer to give everyone. You let officers
Extended by 15 minutes.
It's not that much longer. You know what's the cops calling in. They have at least 10 more minutes because you took time to take everything out. You took time out of people's speaking time to do all the stuff that y'all was doing. You don't need to learn.
We want to hear them. Public comment time was taken up by you escorting out somebody using racial slurs. We should get that time back.
So even when y'all do the right thing, y'all still penalizing the community, sir.
Right.
That's people in my room.
You used to be able to comment after every agenda item. You need to get back to that. And you need to move these meetings.
Officers, please escort all those out who are yelling at us.
Kalanje, say something. You think that we should be allowed to speak? Do something about it.
This one is a conflict of interest. So if I don't want
black protesters to speak, all I gotta do is come here, say the N-word, take up time, and then they can't
Michael, I will ask you to stop speaking at this point. You're disrupting the meeting.
nothing, because you're not doing the right thing.
Michael, please leave the meeting.
Have some moral ethics.
Please escort Michael from the meeting.
Don't listen to people that compromise
Please
themselves.
escort the gentleman in the black shirt and the gold Black Lives Matter shirt from the meeting, please.
That do that. I only listen to people that have some moral ethics. I don't listen to people that sell steroids and spy on their wife. I don't listen to folks like that.
This time we're going to item 3 on the agenda, the consent agenda items A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Do any of the commissioners want any of these items held aside? Seeing none, I move that we adopt and approve all of these items. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. This time we're going to the regular agenda items. Item 4A, the department's verbal presentation on the deployment of Metro Transit Authority lines.
You're in violation of your contract. If you give a fuck about DUIs, you'd make Metro free. You'd be advocating for that. Right? Right?
Mr. Reedy, I'm going to ask that you stop disrupting the meeting.
I want to say special shout out to Larry Hanna. Go fuck you, the LAPBL. Go fuck yourself, Chief Moore. You fucking
Goodbye,
Trump
Mr. Reedy.
supporter. That's what you are, right? Yes. That's what you are, a Trump supporter, right?
We'll never know.
You know what he just said? He said, fuck you, Brick.
What up,
Hey, Larry Hanna, take that L. Thursday, you're gonna take that L in court. Lose to the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition on your bullshit fucking slap motion. Get that shit thrown out. Hey, does William Dorsey Jones still work for this department? Because it's taking
Goodbye, Mr.
your
Reedy.
department 24 days to respond whether or not he's employed by your department. Is he or is he not?
Can you please escort Mr. Reedy out?
Huh? Huh? Is he or is he not? You know if he's employed here still? Kalanche? Speak up, Kalanche. Speak up. You're supposed to represent black and brown people, right? Right? From Ramona Gardens, right?
Chief Graham, Captain Baez, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the commission. So,
Please proceed.
clearly I don't have to introduce Captain Baez, who is the commanding officer of Transit Services Division and responsible for. Thanks, Chief. Captain Baez is the commanding officer of Transit Services Division and is responsible for the operations of LAPD's day-to-day interactions on the metro system. So today we want to just give you a wave-top view of what LAPD's role is in the MTA. A person's access to transportation defines the size of their world. And the role that LAPD plays in the public transit system is to work with our partners on the Sheriff's Department and the Long Beach Police Department, the MTS in the Metro Transit Security environment to make sure that that public transportation is accessible and safe. And we provide the law enforcement services in that layered approach to transit safety. Currently, LAPD is deployed at 110 permanent full-time positions. And every day we hire up to 192 personnel, supervisors and line officers, to provide the actual policing service over 3 shifts over the 24-hour cycle on the system itself. Currently, the LAPD, as of July 1st, has entered year 7 of our contract with the MTA. The MTA contract dates back to 2017, in which a 5-year contract was signed. And in the slide that you have in front of you, you see the progression of cost. Now, you may, the cost has increased fairly significantly between year 5 and year 6, and that is because of the additional, I'm gonna go back a step, that for the first 5 years, our deployment had been static along the lines. But with the opening of the K line and now the opening of the regional connector, that required for the deployment of additional police officers on a daily basis to provide service to the MTA. We'll get into what the future holds in a little bit. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Captain Baez, who's going to go into an overview of operations.
Good morning. So as far as our deployment and operation hours, we do deploy as a two-person configuration, two-person units. Our span of control is comprised of one unit for every 3 stations, typically. Officers are deployed in footbeats, with the exception of during closing hours and for our bus details. Positions are all staffed on cash overtime allotted for scheduling and timekeeping through our COAST system. We have, like the chief said, 110 full-time personnel assigned to the division. 192 are overtime shifts daily. So, and those shifts consist of 5 in the morning till 2 p.m., which is our day watch shift. We have 10 supervisors and 60 officers. Same for our mid shift, which is from 1 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night. And then at our morning watch hours, which is from 9 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning, we have 8 supervisors and 52 officers that are assigned. The majority of our personnel are hired on overtime. We believe that this overtime model is ideal to ensure that our deployment doesn't impact the current services to the city.
The slide says 107. That doesn't include 3 auto mechanics that are paid for by the LA Metro in order to service the vehicles that are required to support our system.
Thank you. And the overtime factor also ensures that staffing is consistent without having to factor in days off, vacations, court, or any type of training. So we're consistently deploying those personnel. So our primary responsibility is we're using our deployment strategies, using obviously crime statistics. Our TSD is deployed using resources based on data-driven crime trends, and we're doing that while doing so by keeping the highest standards of constitutional policing. So our key performance indicators are what we call our KPIs, is what is basically the system or the metrics that's used by MTA to capture our performances, and they're put out there as far as the number of footbeats and patrols, bus stops, transit center trains, platforms, ratios of staffing, proactive versus dispatch activity, incidents response times, our decreases in crime, as well as the number of grade crossings at our railroad crossings, which are measured by our motor units. Our strategic enforcement, we believe in practicing a layered collaborative approach. We've taken on what we call the ecosystem, a multi-layered approach, meeting with all entities and stakeholders on a weekly basis. That includes our law enforcement counterparts, as well as ambassadors, MTA, mental health specialists. Everyone is involved in a meeting Monday, and we take a layered approach on how we're going to address crime in a total sense. And we've since embarked since July 1st on a new approach, redeploying our resources, and so we'll be able to report back on that shortly. But we're seeing definitely a lot of positive from our deployment and strategic deployment. Our supplemental resources, we do have a special problems unit consisting of one supervisor and 12 officers. We have a HOPE unit that deals with our homeless outreach, and that's one supervisor and 10 officers, as well as our K-9, and we also have a community relations office assigned as well. Our critical infrastructure protections, as far as the MTA is related, is Union Station and 7th and Metro, and we work with our partners at Metropolitan Division, who staff Tier 1 officers, 1 supervisor, and 4 officers that are assigned to each of those stations.
So a little bit into the planned future expansions for the MTA. The first is the expansion of the Purple Line, which will go into the West LA area, and at its terminus go all the way out to Westwood. This is expected to be phased in over the next several years with a completion date of 2027. The continued extension of the K line into the city of Inglewood and then out to where it will eventually meet up with the airport's, the LAX's People Mover, to create a system where someone can take either the Metro system or the Metro Link system into Union Station and then take the train right to the People Mover at LAX. We are currently meeting with not only our MTS partners, but with LAX, LAWA PD, in order to make sure that we have a seamless transition when that opens. And it is scheduled to open next spring, April-ish, according to the contractors.
We talked a little bit about the strategic planning. We've definitely made a focus on the red line, which is the most proactive for crime in the system. We've put a lot of measures in place strategically, a lot of accountability, and the expectations for officers to come through. And as you can see, the results, robbery arrests are up 13%, aggravated assaults almost 37%. Our burglary arrests are up 500%, theft arrests up 450%, narcotics arrests up 781%, weapons arrests up 154%, trespass arrests 1,206%. Our total arrests are up 358%. We've released from custody since February. We've written over 3,076, as well as interview cards at 442. Our success is based on the system of tap card inspections, trespass investigations. We've conducted almost 126,000 of those since February, basically limiting the access to those that are riding the system as commuters only. If you're riding the system as a commuter, there's really no issues with what's going on. Our officers don't have the means of doing fair enforcement. They don't have any kind of systems to check that. We're basically just checking access to the system if they have tap cards, and then from there, the trespass investigation can go. And we're seeing a lot of success in doing that. As far as the red line specifically, over the last 9 weeks, as you can see, our rapes are 0 compared to 1, robberies 14 compared to 15, aggravated assaults 19 compared to 20, 26.7 reduction in Part 1 crime. Our grand theft person is 4 to 7, burglaries 0 to 1, and theft 15 to 14. So total reduction is 13.6%, and overall Part 1 crime is reduced at 22.4. We're also seeing a reduction in our Part 2 reductions, which is sexual batteries, trespass, and vandalism, of almost 31%.
So, in conclusion, just a couple things that I want to make clear to the board. First of all, LAPD is not in the business of fare. Fare is a policy decision that is made by the MTA. And as a former user of a reduced bus pass to get to Fulton Middle School and Van Nuys High School, I understand the importance of access. We're about making sure that the people who are on the transit system are the ones that are authorized to be on the transit system. And when they're not, just as any other aspect of our LAPD culture, we use enforcement as a last resort. We have a great partnership with PATH, Persons Assisting the Homeless. We have a great relationship with the Department of Mental Health. And in fact, a Department of Mental Health clinician and 3 USC social work interns deploy every day with our HOPE team to go out there and ensure that we are providing outreach and access to services. But when those activities are not what is required, especially in times of a violent crime, then our police officers are there to intervene and utilize the criminal justice system in order to do that. I'm very proud of the partnership that we've built, not just within those spheres, but also with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and the Long Beach Police Department. We are very quick to exchange intelligence information when we have a potential problem that is moving up. We meet weekly, both on an operational level and an executive level, to discuss policies, to discuss strategic planning, and also to discuss at the operational level what are the current trends and patterns and how do we deploy effectively onto the system. And so with that,
and let me add to that, because I think that a critical element is regarding tap card enforcement is clarity on what that is. The purposes of the transit line is a conveyance of individuals. Everyone clearly understands that, but it sometimes is lost when we see that the occupants on the transit system do not always represent individuals moving from one point to another, but rather the use of the conveyance as a means of a place to stay, as a domicile, for lack of a better phrase. The purpose of the Los Angeles Police Department is not to enforce the fares for those individuals. The purpose of the Los Angeles Police Department is to work with the MTA organization that has a layered approach that includes layers of physical as well as personnel that are charged with exercising fair adherence so that individuals entering the line and use of the line are in compliance with the presence of a tap card and the use of monitoring their entrance and exits. And we fully support that. Those individuals could be security, they may be ambassadors, they may be rail operators, and so forth. What we have seen most recently is that when those layers are ineffective or choose not to monitor those and exercise those responsibilities, is that we have individuals that are entering and staying and residing on these conveyances and pose a serious public and health risk to others that are attempting to use the conveyance in this design. I'm proud of the work of our personnel. They continue to lean forward and to give MTA, as well as myself, to the CEO, direct and factual feedback as to how other aspects of the system can be improved so that those layers are more effective. And that would result in us having even fewer encounters, and certainly would also result in the near elimination, if not the elimination, of having to take enforcement action, whether it be an arrest or a citation of some type. So I want to be clear, though, we believe that the efforts that are being done right now to reassert the fact that the use of this conveyance is to move from one point to another and not to remain and use that as a domicile will and has improved the safety of the line, both in the instances of reduction of violent crime and in the perception of safety. And we will look to the continued work with our partners, as well as to capital changes, improvements in the stations, as well as in the conveyances that discourage those that might see this as a available means and acceptable means of living or existing, and that is not the intended use. We see the bus and rail lines of this city much as I see an airport facility, which is you go there for the purpose, and the purpose is to prepare and engage in transportation from one location to another. The security of our airports is without question a national interest. The security of our bus and rail lines is absolutely a public interest for safety, and we believe that the return of those commuters with the exit from the pandemic can only be strengthened and expanded when the sense of safety is improved. And again, I'll close by saying I'm proud of our work. We have that work cut out for us because of some instances of individuals believing that they can instead just remain regardless of what the rules and regulations are. And we will rely upon the entire system and not just the Los Angeles Police Department in this shared responsibility for safety.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Chief Graham and Captain Bias. My concern with Metro, and since joining the commission, has been, at least when I first joined, there was a sense that Metro wanted the LAPD to almost take a hands-off position to issues and concerns that they saw going on with respect to riders. Riders openly using drugs. The fair thing is one thing. I understand that, but even it had gotten so bad that riders were using the Metro system almost as a domicile. So it was almost becoming a mobile homeless encampment. And the LAPD was instructed by Metro, hands off. By the way, we don't, we're going through this dance of, do we even want LAPD involved? We're still going through that, as I understand it. I'm glad to see some of these numbers that you put up there about year to date in terms of we appear to be more proactive with respect to stopping the assaults, but I dare say that's probably more reactive, that Metro has now curbed their enthusiasm, as it were, to not allow the LAPD to prevent crime. from what was occurring in the past. But now we're allowed to, if we see something going on, we can go after it. And this is all to say that public safety is key, and right now, the public perception of Metro is that it's not safe to ride on. I mean, that's the public perception. So, Chief Graham, Captain Baez, what assurances can you give the citizens of Los Angeles that Metro is now safe to ride on?
I'll start by saying that it's always going to be an evolution. And the perception of the public that's fueled by social media and the things that you see that are on a conveyance are horrible. Because when you're filming somebody on a conveyance, on a bus or a train, and they're acting out or they're involved in violent activity, there's nowhere to go. There's no sanctuary from that. And so the perception of that just multiplies itself. But when you look at a system that provides 7.5 million rides a year, and some 2,000 crimes, and that's violent and property together, that we record on the system every year. There's no statistic that I'm going to be able to put out there that's going to make somebody who has either witnessed this or been a victim of it feel better about their experience. But to the larger public, that is the number. And so it is an environment that is generally safe, and that our officers are continuing to work towards bringing that about. We had a summit last week with chiefs of police and public safety from metropolitan organizations all throughout the country, talking about best practices, and they took a look at some of the systems that we were using in kind, and while they had some very good comments to say, they made some improvement recommendations, especially in the interoperability between the social service aspect of the layered approach, working more in concert with law enforcement rather than having law enforcement in the background. And so we've been moving and making strides in that area. I think that what you saw with those numbers also reflects the change that you're talking about in the MTA themselves. With Captain Baez coming and offering his innovation and his leadership and his messaging to overcome the idea that this is just a place to just go and let these things happen because that's not what is wanted by the management. That took some time to turn that ship. And to get officers back to being comfortable, being proactive, and doing all of the activities that you saw up there. A 3,000% increase in release from custodies is not an accident. It is a change in leadership, it's a change in vision, it's a change in momentum of what they understand as the objective. We are not going to arrest our way out of this. As the chief said, we're a constant voice in the ear of MTA management about our recommendations for physical improvements. They are looking at the Westlake MacArthur Park Station as their pilot for improved turnstiles, for improved cameras. They've already taken our recommendations on improved lighting. We are still working with them to improve the environment of signage, the access to the Metropolitan Transit Watch app. ITB was good enough to upload the Transit Watch app and the Transit Services app up on every mobile phone for every officer in the city, so that we can not only help the public find their way when they're lost, but also instruct them on how to use the Transit Watch app, which is a real-time connection to the MTA's Security Operations Center, so someone can report what they're seeing on the system in real time, so that it can prompt the proper security or police response. So that is going to be a consistent piece, and it's part of the community policing philosophy that the department has held for years. In fact, if I can just highlight, we have gotten also, you're familiar with the community police academies that are done by bureaus. So on Sunday, I dropped by week 5 of Transit Services Division's first community police academy, and this was directed towards persons who speak indigenous languages. We have people who speak 5 indigenous languages in that class, and a local service provider was nice enough to provide free interpreting services. And this is a transportation transit focused a community police academy. And so of the 54 people in that inaugural class, 37 of them regularly use public transportation. And the feedback I got last Sunday was that their direct access to the folks in Metro, talking about their programs, talking about the access, and using the applications to find their way around the county, has had tremendous payback, not just for them. I'm very proud to say that our message permeated, that they're sharing that information with their neighbors, with their family, so that more people can have access to public transportation. It will always be a work in progress, sir. But it's a work in progress that we're happy with the progress that we're going in, and we'll continue to move forward in that direction.
Thank you,
Mr.
Chief.
President, if I could add also,
Sure.
so the 126,000 tap card checks is really important because we found that almost 99% of people we arrest for crimes did not have a tap card. So the enforcement of doing that is definitely proving dividends, and that's part of our public safety strategy. Again, we're not going to arrest our way out of things, but we're finding that people who are accessing the system illegally are the ones who are committing the crimes. And so that is a primary focus from an operational standpoint.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Suthers.
Thank you, Mr. President. And gentlemen, thank you for the report. Just a comment and a question. Just want to thank the men and women that are on that line. Presence does matter. I drive that line about 10 times a week along Expo, and can tell you that what used to be a target-rich environment, no pun intended, for people committing cell phone robberies has pretty much dropped to zero. So I think it's because those officers are there, so thank you. My question is on the statistic involving burglaries. What exactly are you referring to when you said you got burglaries on the Metro line?
It would be actually Metro property itself, because we're responsible for policing the Metro property inside the city. So it would be structures or entering a locked structure on the system.
I see, okay. And where are they largely or mostly located?
It really depends. There's a lot in the downtown area
I see.
because of the Union Station campus. But occasionally you'll see, if they enter a locked office or something in one of the ancillary areas out on the system, especially on the red line, then that would cause the burglary report to be taken.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Shields.
No questions, but thank you for the great presentation and also all the work behind it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kalanche.
I have a question. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of follow-up questions. One is about the tap cards. So if an officer stops at or asks for a tap card, it's just showing the tap card and that's it?
Showing the tap card, or you can actually download tap access through a mobile device, and so they just need to show that to the officers.
Okay. So, okay. Because I know like there's tap cards on the floor, like that you could just pick up, right? Or it's as long as you have a tap card, right?
That's as far as we're going to go in conducting that investigation.
I'm just curious about that. I have a question about the overtime officers, because you have like your regular patrol, right, that work, or you don't?
No, actually, so the majority of our for permanent positions are supervisors, so that we can provide the consistency of knowledge every day as they're working the shift. And so most of the actual workforce that works on the lines come from overtime.
Okay, so I have a question about the training of those individuals. How are they trained? I appreciate that there's like the Monday meetings, that there's like a collaborative effort. How are the officers that routinely like don't work Metro, that they're doing it for? I know you're gonna answer, right? He's like, who wants to answer this? He's like, okay, stop talking. Okay. So yeah, I'm curious because I really believe in this collaborative effort, but what I worry about, and maybe you could clear this up, is that if officers are just doing this as an overtime, that they haven't bought into this whole like collaborative, working with the ambassadors and all that stuff. Okay.
So let me start for the nuts and bolts, and then I can throw it over to Alex. So first of all, by contract, we cannot hire probationers. So you have to be a police officer too, in order to sign up for a detail.
Okay.
So once a police officer becomes a P2, they can send a message to Transit Services Division requesting to be trained. And they go in for a 6-hour training session about rail safety, which is incredibly important, and then the logistics of working on the system. So how to stop the trains, what all the hand signals mean, how to interact with the bus fleet, and then the expectations of the command. And what does it mean when you come out here to work? And then just like any other LAPD officer, your shift starts with roll call. So at roll call, the lieutenant, the watch commander, lays out the expectations for the shift. And prior to, unlike a regular patrol division, an hour prior to shift starting, the supervisors have a roll call, because we actually have multiple roll call locations throughout the system in order to accommodate the size of the system within the city. And so the supervisors all meet with the watch commander, and they go over expectations, changes, mission, crime control information, wanted information, and all of that stuff. And then those supervisors go out and conduct the individual roll calls. Also, in order to ensure that officers are continuing to be productive, especially because, to your point, having people who don't work the system every day coming onto the system, we maintain a very good supervisor to police officer ratio, so that supervisors are readily available to proactively interact with officers while they're out there walking their footbeats. Now, we're 7 years into this, and so there are thousands of officers throughout the department who have done this, they're regulars to come out. They might as well be TSD employees. And they come out and they do 2 or 3 shifts a month. And then from a leadership standpoint, myself, the captain, the commander, we regularly interact with roll calls and get that and solicit that feedback from officers about how what are their thoughts about the changes in policy or just how's it going out there on the lines. And while sometimes we do get feedback about messaging, at least I'm very happy to report that most of the officers that come out there are grateful for the opportunity to come out and do that. And one of the cultural pieces that myself and the commander have been working on, and now that the captain has joined us, is the idea that you're not just lucky to be here to get an overtime shift. You've given up a day off or a vacation day to put your uniform back on and serve the people of the city of Los Angeles. And so the management, the executive management, the supervision of Transit Services Division should be treating them with the gratitude that they deserve. And I'm happy to say that I think that cultural shift has taken hold. And when employees come and they're treated in that fashion, I think that they're much more apt to buy into the mission of safety, engagement, outreach. We make 3,000 interactions every week with MTA employees because my direction to the division was, these are our partners, these are our eyes and ears out there. This is our community that comes out and is on the lines every day. And I would love for you to go almost out of your way to introduce yourself to a custodian, to an engineer, to security guards, and let them know that LAPD is here and that we're your partner in this.
And that's actually what I was getting to, is like these ancillary kind of jobs that are part of like the whole like transportation system, plus the like more proactive type of organizations like the ambassadors and the social service organizations. Like, how are the officers that are working overtime trained with them or interacting with them? That's kind of what I'm getting at, because I know like the team that's there all the time has more connection, but the officers that's just working 2 shifts a month, like how are they working together or introduced to them? Or
Right, part of it is the messaging. That 3,000 contacts a week doesn't come from our regular staff. That comes from our overtime officers going out there, exchanging business cards, shaking hands, right? In fact, when I first met with the union, when I first made deputy chief, and they had explained to us that there felt like there was a disconnect between some of the custodial staff and the security apparatus in Metro. That's when I went back to the division and I said, no, I want you to go and I want you to find these individuals while they're working and go up and ask them how it's going. How do you feel? How's it going? And so, within the first 2 months, I had another meeting with the union president. He was like, yeah, this was weird. That, like, LAPD officers coming up to us and shaking our hands and how you doing? And, it was a new experience for them. But it's about messaging. It's about clear messaging and clear understanding. And I'm happy with the quality of LAPD officers that we have, and that they're very quick on the uptake. Again, we had some incredible turnarounds in productivity, and that came about in a 9-week period of time. And those came because I believe of the quality of an LAPD officer across the board.
Captain?
He might have covered it. I mean, obviously, communication is the big factor here, and holding people accountable. It's one of my biggest challenges, like what you're talking about, bringing in people from the outside, and so the accountability piece is on supervision and leadership, is making sure that we're communicating correctly. We have created a video that goes out to all roll calls with our SLOs and our entire staff, and so that we can talk about how they can interact with the different agencies, talk about how our deployment, the strategic things that we do, all that stuff is put out there. Our senior lead officers go to every single roll call at least once a month and discuss some of these things, as well as our watch commanders and our supervisors. We have our own internal meetings so that they can get this messaging, and it changes a lot. But I have a model that I just ask them for 100%, and they're going to get 150%.
And how many
back.
senior leads do you have?
6.
6, okay. Thank you. Thank you for the information.
I want to add just to that, one of the specific and strategic decisions that were made some 7 years ago was to assign the supervisory personnel as permanent members rather than on an overtime basis. And that's another layer of culture and consistency, because those supervisors, and you saw the numbers, those are significant numbers of supervisors around a 24-hour clock, are also charged with monitoring and observing and supervising and leading the officers that are there. So that's the frequency of the officers that work these lines, their enforcement and supervision and encouragement and positive reinforcement for those officers that conform to their duties that we ask them to. And there are no-fly lists, if you will, of individuals who have not met the mark, that have not conformed with the expectations, that have become independent contractors or otherwise. And both contractually as well as culturally, I'm proud of this bureau that has held the high standards that Deputy Chief Bob Green established, in the initiation of this endeavor some 7-8 years ago.
Yeah, I just want to say that just listening to this paradigm or culture shift and how we work with the public is great, and just how do we do that across the city, right? Where it's almost second nature to come up to people and say hello. And I know that we
Well, it does happen, Commissioner. That happens very frequently.
I made a career out of it.
I know. But I'm just saying where it's just embedded. I mean, I still walk down the street and officers don't say hi to me. I mean, so it's just how is it that it just becomes part of
I apologize that if you said hello to an officer, he didn't say hello back, or she didn't. And our expectation is time and place matters. But if in a standard walkabout, foot beat, or an engagement, that we acknowledge each other, just say hello. It's one of the most human interactions.
and I'm not saying that we're not doing a good job.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying that at all. I just say we could strive for even better.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we're not doing a good job. We are, right? And I know, and I work with a lot of senior leads, and I know that they're trying and that they do 400% effort. I'm just saying that
It's not 190 senior leads that say hello. They say hello, but there's 9,000 members plus a substantial civilian professional workforce that go out every day, from crime scene technicians to working with victims, with witnesses, and common engagements all throughout this organization. We strive for perfection, and to your point, if your interest is that we have these type of results,
we keep
there you
striving.
go.
Yes.
We will do that. But I want to articulate, it's defensive, I guess, that the representation, that how do we take this model and extend it across the department? I believe the model is extended across the department. It's not a niche with this organizational part. It's not a niche with CSPB. It's not a niche with senior leads. It's an expectation of service to our communities as a core value is upon every one of us, including us in here, as we see members in the community, some who welcome us, others who welcome us in different ways, is that we extend the common the common decency of a hello.
Not meaning to offend anyone, I just want to say, like, my whole, like, job is to ensure that, like, every single person in the city has a great experience when they interact with law enforcement. That's what I believe in, and that's what I will always work towards, not trying to offend anybody.
Thank you, Commissioner Calanche. Thank you, Chief Graham and Captain Baez. I really appreciate your presentation and learning what we're doing now in partnership with Metro. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this time, we're going to take an 8-minute recess before we go to item 4B on the agenda. We have a quorum present. We're going to resume now with item 4B. Commander Mastic and Commander Billy Brockway. Here, sir.
Morning, sir.
Morning. And who else is present at the table?
I also have with me Lieutenant John Larson and Miss Sondri Kramer from D.D. Hirsch.
Okay, great. Thank you. Proceed.
Good morning, Mr. President. We were called in to speak with regard to alternatives to armed response, and with that, we have a brief presentation for the morning. We've also developed a fact sheet that I believe the commission may already have that's an overview on the department's alternative to crisis response. And Commander Brockway also has a portion of that with homeless and with the Circle program. So with that, I will hand it to Lieutenant Larson.
Thank you, Commander. Lieutenant Larson, I'm the officer in charge of the Crisis Response Support Section. Under that falls our MEU SMART division and our deployment there. Sitting to my left is a partner of ours with Ms. Sondri Kramer. She's a program manager for D.D. Hirsch. That's where we defer and we divert some of our 911 crisis calls to our suicide hotline or our crisis response hotline. And she's here we'll talk about that shortly, and then she's here for some answers, a question and answer period for that. But back in 1993, and all of this information, we're going to do a quick overview, and it's all in your fact sheet on there. But in 1993, this is when we started our MU SMART unit, and we are pretty much one of the leaders in the nation with the SMART units with a co-response model. We are deployed, our MU SMART units are deployed as a sworn police officer with a licensed Department of Mental Health clinician. We are not in a regular police uniform when we go out there, so we're less evasive and we're more friendly, as we want to be more friendly and more advantageous to our department, getting to help with our individuals who are suffering their mental crisis at the time. When we talk about the co-response model, that refers to we respond with patrol officers that are in full uniform, and we respond in a perfect world, they respond to the incidents at the same time, at the same location. We go there we try to de-escalate, we try to minimize our issues with our patrol individuals, and we try to resolve the conflict peacefully without and when we do that, we've been doing that quite successfully when doing this. So far this year, we have 52 officers, sworn officers assigned to our MU unit, and we have 23 licensed clinicians. One of the bonuses that we have for our department, our division, is we have our CAMP units, our Case Assessment Management Program unit. Those are our detectives. We have 7 detectives, and we have 7 licensed clinicians that provide follow-up to these individuals that are suffering their mental crises. Those are beneficial for us, as the chief will probably talk about later, because we do a lot of follow-up with our individuals to try and resolve these issues peacefully and to continue making sure these individuals that we have our initial contact with get help. So we have the person in mind, our subject in mind, and we continue focusing on those individuals. Their cases usually never close because we're constantly monitoring and following these individuals to make sure they're having their treatment. A bonus we have for our division is we have our triage desk. We have 4 officers assigned to our triage desk 24 hours, 7 days a week. Those are our phone operators in better terms. Those are the individuals that the patrol unit will call, officers will call, and they will ask for advice. They will ask if we have any prior contacts with these individuals, give us some insight, give them some help in the directions that we've had previous contacts with these individuals. Not part of this fact sheet, but last year we had 83,000 contacts at our triage desk by our officers. So that is being utilized. Per our MU policy, when our patrol officers are encountered with an individual with mental illness, the policy states that when the scene is stabilized, they shall call the triage desk. So all these individuals get called. The keyword stabilized is one that has some interpretation to it, but we are seeing, since the start of the year, we're seeing more frequent contact with officers that as they are en route to these certain calls, specific calls where there's a named subject, they're calling us and asking, okay, give us some initial insight so they can better serve that individual. And so it's really being effective in what we're doing with certain circumstances there. Part of our fact sheet, we know right now we currently handle about 1/3 of our mental health calls within the city. We need to expand that. So under the chief's approval, we are seeking to expand our SMART unit to 50 clinicians and 84 officers. However, we have some feedback and some pushback on a little bit because in order for us to be successful, the Department of Mental Health with the county has to be successful in obtaining additional clinicians for us. And if you understand the media, understand the crisis right now with mental health, that is a hard task to fill right now with the task of clinicians, but we are working hand in hand with the county to make that happen. Currently, we have, I believe, 3 of them within the next 3 or 4 weeks that we're going to be hiring to add to our team, which will bring us up to 26. And so that'll help us in that. We will have questions, so there'll be more questions. I wanted to also invite, I know that several of the commissioners have been a part of MEU and came and visited MEU, so you can see hand in hand what we do. That invitation is welcome to you anytime, any place. We love to have you there. We do that for our partners in this, but one thing I want to share a little bit of time with is our Dee Dee Hirsch component here today. Miss Sandra Kramer, this was her brainchild back in 2015? 19. You're not that old. 2015, it was before, she predates me. But this was her, she came and she approached the lieutenant at the time, Lieutenant Bixler at the time, about having a partnership to where we can divert some of our calls to her crisis center. And if we could share some time and talk about your little crisis center for a second, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, it's been it took a while to get this program off the ground, to get the right funding, but we managed to get that and launched in February of 2021. I've been here before to talk to you guys about that. It's been very interesting. I think that we've learned, especially through the pandemic, that some lessons with understanding each other's scope, like what can the crisis line do versus what can dispatch do. But it is very successful. We're reaching actually a population, and I want to make a very specific point about this because it's not something that we expected. We are reaching far more male callers and far more African American callers, as well as Hispanic, although that has kind of slowed down a little bit, than we do on a regular crisis line. So we didn't expect that. We're currently working with USC School of Social Work to do a research evaluation project on this. The good news is that after 988 launched, which launched almost exactly 1 year ago, there's a lot of national pressure on 911 centers to collaborate with 988. And I'm so excited that we were ahead of that curve because we did that before that even came into being. It has meant that there's been a lot of national media attention on this particular program. So we want it to shine and make it better, but it has been a great collaboration so far.
Can you, just for the commissioners' edification, give a scale of the number of calls to 988 in LA County compared to the rest of the country? It's my understanding LA County leads the country in the number of 988 calls.
Yes, we are, yes, and I do not know the exact numbers. I wish I had that in my head, but we are, and California as a state is also by far the busiest state when it comes to call volume from 988. And D. Hirsch happens to be the largest 988 crisis center in the country as well, and one of only 3 that is 24/7 Spanish, which is very advantageous for us to be in this particular area as well. Yes, very busy.
Just one additional thing is this model that we have right now, the County of Los Angeles has adopted that model and is implementing that as we speak right now for a 911 crisis diversion model across the county. And so that's one thing that we've been working with the County Crisis Response Committee through Janice Hahn's office. And then we were working on that, and they asked us why we were so successful, and we were an open book with them, and we gave them our model, and they're running with that right now. And there's 3 or 4 law enforcement agencies that are smaller than us that are implementing this program with a few modifications, but it's one that's working for us that we're able to share across the board with other entities. And that is our presentation.
Thank you, Captain, but go ahead, Commander, you want to say something?
Oh, not at all, sir. Go ahead.
So, Captain, first of all, I applaud and support the notion that you want to expand the SMART units across the city. I think it's needed, quite frankly. I think more than what you have here is actually needed. Because as commissioners, almost on a weekly basis, when we go into closed session and we look at the cases that we're presented with, I would say that a lot of instances involve someone who is suffering from some form of mental illness at that moment or mental crisis. You teed it up by saying, in a perfect world, this SMART team would be there with officers. Unfortunately, we're not in that perfect world. But how do we get to the point where when a call comes in to 911 and it's clear from the call itself into 911 that someone on the end is suffering from some mental illness, someone who wants to die by suicide with having an officer perform that act, someone who's out there deranged with some object and is going around beating others. You pick any number of hypotheticals that are out there. And it's clear when the 911 call comes through that something is happening like that, but we only dispatch, officers rather than SMART teams with them. How do we get to that world where either A, we have a SMART team automatically dispatched, but I know that's going to take a lot more personnel, or at least B, we have the SMART team immediately contact the responding officers so that the responding officers can at least communicate with the officers who are responding. And I get it that some of these things unfold within seconds, that it's really kinetic, it happens really fast. But that's a perfect world that I envision. So how do we get there?
It's interesting. There's a lot of those perfect scenarios that we don't ever hear about because we are contacted, we go out there, and the situation gets resolved. I'll share an experience. A few weeks ago, North Hollywood Division, we had an individual, and it was Captain Muhammad at the time, smart, understood what was going on with it. The individual suicidal, was going to drive off of a cliff. He requested the resources. We had SMART teams available. Our watch commander knew some history with this individual because we knew that he was a veteran, this individual that was going through this crisis. So our watch commander knew that we had a veteran working that day, deployed that veteran to that scene, and it wasn't the clinician that was able to gain trust with that individual. It was our officer who had that history, and we were able to resolve that, but that wasn't in the news. Okay, so we do have those going on, but the one perfect world is when we talk about our big push right now for expansion is right now we deploy anywhere between 10 to 13 units a day for the city of Los Angeles. That's not enough, right? We're hopeful that we can go up to 24 units a day, and of course that's not going to be enough either. We know that as well. But one thing we want to do with that expansion is we're able to deploy our resources to the 4 bureaus to where they're more readily available for these incidents so that they can be right there and be dispatched. We were at training yesterday at Communications Division, Sandra and I, trying to better train and better inform and better get a vision of our communications personnel, our PSRs. They're the ones that are receiving these phone calls. They're the ones that are dispatching us. So we're trying to make sure that they understand what these individuals are saying, even though they might not be in tune with the mental crisis at the time, but they can understand that, yes, if that is a mental crisis that's happening, and I can understand that through our training and experience, then yes, let's deploy a smart unit alongside of that, or let's make sure that we have somebody going in that direction. So it's a team approach that we have to do because it starts with Communications Division, which, bless them, they're doing a great job with the limited resources they have right now. Because we've talked about that, and we're trying to do a better job to get not only more calls or the right calls diverted to Sandra Dee Dee Hurst, but also making sure we have the right deployment of our personnel to these crisis calls. The issue comes down to is making sure that if there's something that is mental health related, they will respond the call, they will assign the call, have SMART respond with it, right? And we do that, we can respond with it. It's the point is a lot of times our individuals, when it's an active crime in progress, maybe hypothetically on Sunday with somebody going down in West Valley with a pipe, it was an active crime in progress, that component of the mental health wasn't addressed at that time and we weren't dispatched that way. If we can hopefully get them to start talking this and understanding that, then yes, we can start dispatching in that manner.
Thank you, Captain. Commissioner Suthers.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you all for this presentation. And I want to thank Mr. T-Fank for directing this to you. I'm the one who requested this report. And just let me frame this so you understand why the title. 2 years ago, I embarked on a listening tour in Southwest as part of a USC effort. And when we looked at what public safety needed to be as we talk about 21st century policing, there were 4 things that the community constantly asked us for: transparency, accountability, community care, and alternatives to armed response. If I were going to add a 5th one, I'd say officer wellness, and you got the makings of a tremendous police department. So there's a couple things here that I want to repeat for people who don't know that I think we need to do a better job of advertising. You say here, between 2021 and 2022, the SMART program saved approximately 15,522 patrol hours. The following year, 2022 to 2023 of this year, you saved approximately 9,753 patrol hours, with an average response time reduced to 22 minutes for each call. Those are things that people should know. Those are things that people who are asking us to come up with alternatives to armed response and less than lethal, they should know what's being done right now. And I'm not surprised to hear that they want to expand it. And Ms. Kramer, thank you for your work. I work closely with your folks at the School of Social Work and County Mental Health, and it's because of that we now have an MHEART program at USC, which is a mental health and response team, which are officers teamed with clinicians rolling to welfare checks. So thank you for your work. My comment is this. When you talk about what I'd like to see, I understand that LA County Department of Mental Health has to hire 27 additional clinicians, and I know they're doing that. What I'd love to have you do is come back in 6 months and just someone come back and tell us where they are with that. I'm hoping that some number, some significant percentage of that can be met as a result of their recruitment efforts to hire people. Everybody has that challenge. The other thing I'd like to mention is, let's see here. I'm embarrassed to say I live in Pacific Division, I've lived there for 30 years, didn't know the Circle Project was in my backyard. Now I do. And it's the city's most extensive alternative to armed response pilot program that we have. Having said that, what I'd like to know, and if you can't tell me today, come back and tell me, what are the 7 divisions of LAPD that are employing this program? And I'd like to know how they were identified out of 21 to pilot the program.
Mr. Suthers, we also have Commander Brockway here. He's prepared to speak on homeless as well as the Circle program. So I was going to pass it to him and his team if we could do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if we're done with SMART.
Any more questions?
I'm done with SMART. Yes, sorry. I wanted to move on to Circle.
And we'll pull up, sir. Thank you, sir.
But I don't want to take away smart comments from my colleagues. So should I save this? You were moments from a clean getaway. Should I save my Circle comments?
Save the Circle
Okay,
comments.
then
and
I'll
we'll-
save the Circle.
We'll go to Commissioner Shields since she has some questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I did just have, well, first I wanted to say thank you, Ms. Kramer, for really allowing the department to be kind of a leader in the nation on this front. So thank you for your persistence and for encouraging the department to engage in this terrific alternative. And thank you, Lieutenant, also for the information about the SMART program, which I'll echo Commissioner Southern's thing that we really need to be better advertisers, even of the example that you provided, because again, the only things that make the news are when things go wrong, and there are many instances in which lives are saved, because of the programs of this department. A question about just in terms of, there's a chart in here about the number of SMART calls handled, and in 2022, there were a couple thousand additional calls than 2018, yet a couple thousand fewer responses. Is that a matter of staffing, or are there any other, how has the staffing compared from 2018 to 2022?
We're actually down with our staffing right now, but that is, short answer to it, it is a staffing issue right now that we're working on it, and also some of these calls that we get handled, and we'll just briefly talk about that, is when a call comes out and if there's a medical component to that, the fire department will respond. And a lot of times the fire department, if they take the individual and transport them, then we do not handle that call. So the fire department will handle the call. So some of those calls are fire department because there's a medical component with these calls of service. And that could be some of the strewing of the numbers in there. But yes, we do have some staffing shortages, but we also see an increase of individuals that are having mental health crisis.
And I want to clarify on the staffing shortage, this is a direct relationship to the number of clinicians we don't have. The staffing shortage is not a department function. It is our continued work with DMH at the highest levels to either as a higher additional staffing, which they're having as an agency, a tremendous challenge retaining staff, as well as attracting new staff. We're asking for innovative measures such as personnel, actions we've employed, alternate means of deployment of clinicians to include telehealth, having a remote ability to work with us, which we feel would be less effective, but as a shoestring or an effort to try to provide a clinician's voice in the conversation that SMART's present. Secondly, is we believe that just as this department has had to marshal its existing personnel on an overtime basis, that every agency has some capacity for that, as we do, and we believe DMH does as well. We're asking them currently to provide the opportunity for any DMH clinician, properly trained and certified, to work on an overtime basis to surge while they attempt to build and bolster their staffing.
Thank you. And one additional question, Lieutenant, you mentioned kind of like the standard of, because this is a co-responder model, but not necessarily coming out exactly at the same time as the patrol unit. And so at times you have to rely on the patrol unit actually calling you, and the standard of when the scene is stabilized. Now, again, this almost sometimes defeats the point, because if the scene was stabilized.
Let's clarify that,
Yes.
though, because we do consider ourselves in a co-responder model. So I'd like you to clarify, Lieutenant or Commander, that how we call screen, and whether we do not dispatch a co-responder to every call for service, and that the number in the hundreds of thousands.
Right.
There is a call screening at the call intake point that identifies individuals that are likely experiencing a mental health crisis of some type, and that's going to result in the immediate dispatch of an available SMART team in concert or in response, accompanied by a patrol unit. There's other instances in which the immediacy of the matter may not present itself immediately as a mental health matter, but then the officers, upon arrival, by behaviors or their additional information they gather, even en route, they recognize this is an instance which will benefit from a SMART team dispatch, and they'll be dispatched. We do this just like we would SWAT or other specialized units is, it may not meet the initial criteria, but then it is. But let me clarify, a year and a half ago, more than a year and a half ago, we stepped up our protocols so that no longer would a unit be dispatched, then determine it's a mental health related call, and now have to have a smart unit en route. Instead, at the call intake point, we will respond. The challenge is that on an average day, the lieutenant indicated you post 13 to
It's 10 to 13 units. a day.
Okay, the Los Angeles Police Department posts more than 200 cars on average a day, and about 1 in 3 of those calls that officers handle, as many as 1 in 3, have a mental health component. And so it is a scarcity of resource that is a direct impact on the availability of the co-response model to respond in all instances of potential mental health versus an actual articulation that this is a mental health episode. Now, I'm happy also to report that fortunately the program doesn't rely upon LAPD fixing this, meaning that this is a shared responsibility, and the alternative services that's been identified through 988, alternative services has been identified through the establishment of the Circle program with providers such as Urban Alchemy and others, are allowing us to alternatively dispatch thousands of calls today that just 4 years ago would not have been dispatched to an alternative. So it's going to take a multi-layered approach that is going, and all aspects of that framework need to build, and they need to build to scale quickly. And I'll say at a more quicker pace than we currently are doing. Anything you'd add to that?
No, sir. Perfect.
Anything further, Commissioner Shields? Commissioner Kalante?
Can you walk me through, just so that I understand it, and this is kind of a follow-up to Commissioner Shields' comments and question. Walk me through a call, and then at what point it gets diverted to Urban Alchemy or Circle or a co-response. Yeah, just so that I understand like what the key criteria is.
Ma'am, so Commander Brockway is going to give us homeless and Urban Alchemy as well as Circle.
Okay, so let's talk about the mental health.
Call it take.
So on the mental health, we will go with that one there. So if a call comes in to the call center, right? If somebody has, they're talking about they want to harm themselves, clearly it's some mental illness component, right? But it doesn't, there's a specific criteria that if they meet this criteria, if they're in a public space, on a high rise, on an overpass, trying to attempt suicide, armed with a gun, where the public is present, there's 5 criteria, then we automatically will dispatch a MEU SMART team, a co-response model, we dispatch that. If at that time the communications views that is somebody who's just suffering from a mental crisis, at which time they will divert the call then to DD Hirsch. And then what they would do with that call is we have a direct line to DD Hirsch, that is a direct call. These, in the perfect world, but it's in the protocol, we call that a warm handoff, meaning our communications specialist will contact the DD Hirsch hotline. The DD Hirsch will answer the phone, and they will explain what's going on, and they do that warm handoff to that individual for the DD Hirsch. And you want to explain what you guys do after that?
We handle them like all our 98 calls. Basically, it's actually the same thing. We do a suicide risk assessment, we do safety planning, we provide emotional support and de-escalation of the crisis. A very small percentage of those calls end up needing 911 support after all. The average, I believe, of that we actually facilitate is maybe 2% of them. We have a direct line back in. The crisis counselor stays on the phone with the caller. A shift supervisor makes that connection to LAPD. And that allows us to continue to provide de-escalation and emotional support so that when officers arrive, it's a more stable scene. Yeah, and that is really the way it works.
So I think I feel like where the gap is, and I think this was mentioned a couple of times, is the co-response when there's crime in progress or a gun or threat to somebody's safety, right? So we see a lot of these cases. There was, every week, as Commissioner Briggs brought up, how can we do a better job. I mean, it seems like a huge task because officers are tasked with a lot already. How do we get to the point where we can address those kinds of calls as well?
So one thing that I have not talked about is right now we have a very aggressive mental health training program that we're providing for the officers. Mental health intervention training, which we provide that 25 weeks out of the year to our officers. Currently we have over, I think it's 5,600 officers that are trained. So they're receiving this training, these are the patrol officers, not the ones that are assigned to our units here. The patrol officers, so they can better recognize these individuals and probably identify some of the things that they're going through, some of the symptoms and signs and the diagnosis that they're going through. I think a lot of this goes down to training, goes back to experience, making sure from all levels of this that we can identify this at the first time that we can identify it to get the right resources in place. One thing that we get a lot of calls are from officers that say, they're on a call out there and SMART was not dispatched, but our officers are identifying that, hey, there's a mental health component, so they're calling us to come out there and help resolve the situation. Or what they end up doing is they call us and they put in a referral so that we can do a follow-up with them. So we're a huge city. We're trying to work with the different components and the different organizations and the different entities, whether it's with SMART, with D.D. Hirsch, with Circle, with the alternative crisis responses teams, with the county, the PMRTs, the MCOT teams. We're trying to bring those all under one fold so we can utilize all these different resources to help make this successful. This is something we have to do as a group. I think it'd be very difficult for us to be successful as just a single entity in this matter.
Right. So the ideal, as Commissioner Briggs stated, is to have all the resources that we need to be able to correspond or, just be proactive as much as we can. Okay. Yeah, I just feel like this is such a priority, not just for the city, but for the county, because the county has the resources. And I know that we task officers with doing so much, right? And just having the support that they need to address these mental health issues could solve a lot and could help them do their job better, right? So I just wanted to just add one more thing. I know that the DMH has, the chief talked about possibly like an overtime or some creative way of hiring. So I kind of been talking about this. I'm wondering, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. I feel like there's a lot of private practice clinicians that are amazing and do amazing work. So I'm wondering, how can we, and this is and maybe you've thought about this already, but how to get them to become a reserve unit or something that gets paid, but that these are probably your most experienced folks that are out there in private practice, and get them into the rotation, right, to be part of these SMART teams. So I just wanted to get your take on that.
Well, since we were at a meeting yesterday, or not yesterday, last week, whatever we were in a meeting with Department of Mental Health, talking exactly about this issue, because the Sheriff's Met team is the exact same positions, and we're all in competition for the same elusive clinicians, right? So there were some very good creative strategies around recruitment, hiring, to the point of at a national level with CIT. CIT is working on a new type of a crisis worker who is kind of like a paramedic, but it's going to be a paraclinician. And to really start creating sort of a new career path for some behavioral health specialists. The problem right now is, this is what we keep hearing. Why would I go and be part of a 24/7 job where I could be on hold for having be on call for 24/7, and go into the community into potentially volatile situations when I can make more money sitting at home doing telehealth therapy. That is what we're hearing. But I also know not every clinician is that way. So I think that's actually that's another idea. I hadn't heard that one yet, to maybe create sort of a reserve force. So definitely being talked about at the county level. We had great strategy sessions around that. So more
and
is
those
coming.
in private practice have very flexible hours, so
Exactly.
they can work it into their
Yeah. Like it.
Well, thank you for all that you do. This is amazing. I think it's only going to grow more. I think this is a way that, to let law enforcement do law enforcement and have these other units that are working with law enforcement to address some of these other issues that are highly, technical, specialized, that requires specific expertise. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kalanche. Commander Brockway.
Pass to you, Billy.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Kalance, Commissioner Shields, Ms. Munoz, Commissioner Briggs, Commissioner Southers, Mr. T-Fank, Inspector General, Mr. De La Guerra, and Chief of Police. Appreciate your time and good afternoon. Very excited to be here to speak about our Circle program and also talk a little bit about our Coors program. So with me, I'll have them introduce as we go through, but we're going to first talk about the Circle program. So to my left is CT, Commissioner Kalanche. He is from Communications Division. He'll be able to walk us through what it looks like from a call all the way through Circle or anybody else. Cody De La Rosa is the Assistant Commanding Officer. That's my title for him. Homeless Coordinator. Cody De Rosa is a Senior Lead Officer. He has extensive experience with HOPE, and he works very closely with me, and he works very closely with the Circle program. And to my right, we'll talk about Alex Alejandro in a minute. He's going to go over our Coors program. So we're going to start with our Circle program. So I'm very honored here to speak about the Circle program that was started by the Mayor's office a couple years ago, and specifically with Shannon Pryor, who we work very closely with from the Mayor's office, who is the point for the Circle program. So the Circle program was started back in 2021 into 2022. We started out, Commissioner Southers, in two divisions. And that was in Hollywood Division and Pacific Division. We had a role in deciding on which locations we're going to start with based upon calls for service. Plus our experience as HOPE officers and officers out in the field to pilot the Circle program in those two divisions. I will tell you very quickly, we had great success. So those Circle teams are made up of two life experience individuals. Chief Moore and myself were able to walk a footbeat in Hollywood with some of the individuals that are working in the Circle program, the nonprofit, the service provider, as well as a mental health clinician, to see the relationships that they are building with individuals that are experiencing homelessness, mental health issues, substance abuse issues. So they are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week throughout. Started with those two pilot divisions. Now we're into 12 divisions. So we have seen tremendous success from start to finish. The communication aspect of it is probably the most critical. And then the relationships that we have with the Mayor's office and the outreach providers in the divisions once that's rolled out. In Hollywood and Pacific, the commanding officers as well as the senior lead officers have a tremendous relationship with the Circle program and work closely hand in hand to address issues and concerns from 0600 in the morning to 0559 in the morning, so 24/7. So what I'd like to do to address some of the questions that you had, Commissioner Kalanche, is have CT talk a little bit about what the process looks like when somebody calls 911 or someone calls 311 or the non-emergency number and what that looks like to get to the Circle program. Now again, these Circle programs are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and there's many components that we could get into detail, but I think we all know that I can talk for a little bit of time, so I don't want to do that. I want to defer to kind of some of the expertise, then we'll go into Cody to talk about what the day-to-day operations look like. So CT?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you. And looks like you have a lot of questions from everything I'm hearing. I'm a Senior PSR 1, Ching Feng. I represent Communications. So I know the Circle program and the other alternative dispatch program is big on everybody's view and docket and everything. So to give a little background, as of end of June, we received so far 1.8 million 911 calls. We're on track to pass the 2.5 million from last year. We have over 500,000 last year on our non-emergency line, and we're again on track to pass that with so far 250,000, 260,000 as end of June. We are the first point of contact for the public for the majority of the public, they do not call the non-emergency line. They want to call 911. So our operators, our hardworking operators, with every call is an interview first. And the interview is to find out whether or not there is an ongoing crime, there is immediate danger, threat, or potential violence. That's the most important thing, and that's what they're basing it on first as far as what anything that the public reports first, whether it's a person experiencing homelessness out in public, what they're doing. So those are the questions they're asking: what, where, when, what exactly are they doing? Once they can determine that none of those criteria are met on the 911 line, then they would transfer that. It does not require an immediate police response, a response of urgent need. They transfer it to the non-emergency line. So that public caller that's calling about the person experiencing homelessness that's maybe trespassing, that's loitering, that's making excessive noise because of their radios and things like that, they're going to wait on that non-emergency line until another operator is available to answer that call. So again, there's a long delay for that caller to, even before getting to Circle. Once that that caller's answered, then again, the same process goes again because there's a new operator asking those questions. And once that can be determined, then they would create an incident so we can track on our end, and then they would call Circle directly and to transfer that caller and provide a warm handoff so that Circle will be able to get the information from that caller and send one of their teams out. But also during that time as a 911 operator or the main operator or secondary operator, that's part of the process. They also determine whether or not a caller would be referred to D.D. Hirsch, if the caller would be referred to CORS for an online report, if it's just vandalism, if it's a theft. So again, it requires that operator to make that decision purely based on their experience, their knowledge, their training, to make that decision of now, which diversion program do this caller qualify for? And then they will transfer those callers to the appropriate diversion program.
Thanks, CT. So I don't think I mentioned earlier, I'm Billy Brockway, I'm the Department Homeless Coordinator. I'm also the liaison with the Mayor's Office for an unresponse model. So we meet a lot to discuss what the future is going to look like. With the Circle program that we have now, we meet bi-weekly with Communications Division, which is an incredibly important component of this, the Mayor's Office, the outreach providers, as well as the divisions that are affected. And when I say affected, in a positive way, we're those 12 divisions that we're working. So we meet with their commanding officer. Through the Homeless Coordinator's Office and the Mayor's Office and Communications, we actually go out to the roll calls. We bring the outreach providers, in this case, Urban Alchemy, to meet with the officers to discuss what it looks like, what they do, how they operate, and how we can all work together collectively and cohesively. To go into a little bit more detail of what that looks like on a day-to-day operation, I'm going to defer to Cody DeRosa to talk a little bit about what it looks like when Circle rolls out, what our role is, which is mostly through communication, and then the relationship that we have with the outreach provider. Cody?
Hello, everyone. I'm Cody DeRosa. The divisions that you had asked about are Central, Rambart, Hollenbeck, Northeast, Newton, Pacific, Hollywood, Van Nuys, Mission, and Foothill. They are not all encompassing, but they are in those divisions currently. Working with Circle and the Mayor's Office has been successful in reducing call load and also building community trust and working with the community and bridging the gap between patrol officers and Circle and utilizing communications in between the two. And what I say by that is the community can call the 877 number or they can call 911 and communications can triage that call accordingly, as my partner explained. The other side of the component is that officers out in the field that identify someone that needs help, needs clothing, needs food, needs to just make a connection between the two. Officers are allowed to utilize their radios to go over the air, ask communications, can you please send Circle out? We're in an RD, possibly. And whether they are or they're not, communications can verify and they can connect the two. And then Circle can respond. PD is not required to stand by, but it's a case-by-case and discretionary based on time and call load. But the officers can request that and bridge that gap between the community. The other thing that we bring to the table for the divisions is educating the SLOs for the CPABs and saying, hey, by the way, tell your community members and your neighborhood councils and say, hey, this is what's going on. We do have this resource. If you have someone that's saying at the end that's playing loud music that is loitering, or that the community needs a response that may not be necessary to have PD respond, but they could have Circle respond. And Circle could come out there and educate the individuals, hey, we don't like this, or hey, Starbucks would like you to leave, or an organization would like you to leave, but they didn't want a police model to come in between. A lot of things they also bring to the table is also the decompression centers, that if people are experiencing a moderate crisis, that they need time to decompress from the conflicting area they may be in, they can go to the decompression center and get services there, get clothing, food, and more of a one-on-one personalized event or meeting with that individual in Circle, with PD being removed. PD will respond if Circle identifies an issue or that the call may have escalated while Circle is there. Circle will back up, and then they will re-notify communications, and then PD will respond at the time.
So with that, I would really like to invite any of the commissioners to go walk a footbee with us, to walk with the Circle program, to meet Shannon Pryor, to meet the mayor's office, the deputy mayor who's overseeing this, to see what success looks like in my mind. Qualitatively, quantitatively. Quantitatively, we're seeing in those 12 divisions with those specific RDs, we're seeing an 8.4% reduction in crime.
And I want to clarify, and just so the scale of this is understood, Circle would be in the entire area of those areas if it had the scale of personnel. So can you, Commander, go into briefly, how are the neighborhoods chosen that are in the Circle program? And then the earlier Commissioner had a question relative to why these commands and not others.
So again, it goes down to quantify and qualify. So we're looking at areas that have large encampments, and then we're looking at areas that are having calls related to people experiencing homelessness and mental health issues. 311 calls for cleanups. So we've specifically worked with the mayor's office to identify those areas per reporting district, and then because of staffing issues, we limit it to those reporting districts to start, because it's a pilot program, or was started as a pilot program. So these life-experienced individuals that are hired are people that were homeless, or maybe had a mental health issue, or maybe had narcotics abuse, or maybe went to jail. And the gentleman that we met in Hollywood Division had severe life experience. They went to jail. They were homeless. They had addiction issues, and they overcame all that because they want to come back and make a difference with that community. They can relate, and our officers are able to relate in a better fashion to build that community trust, as Cody had said, but to build long-term meaningful relationships. And the chief's 100% right. We're having the same issues as far as hiring everybody, meaning can't speak for the mayor 100%, but these clinicians, it's a crisis. It's hard to get people to come out and do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So sometimes it becomes a telehealth issue if we can't fill those positions, or if the mayor's office can't fill those. But our role, again, is to support the mayor's office, create a safe working environment the best we possibly can, utilize communications to get that information through accurately. Those PSRs that are working have a lot on their minds to be able to figure out where things need to go and how to go. Back to the quantifying, we also are seeing a reduction in calls for service. As the report shows, we've been seeing an increase in calls that are these warm handoffs through communications. Obviously, we went from 2 to 12, but when we break it down, we are seeing more and more calls that are being diverted as we continue to train and work with the PSRs in the mayor's offices and Shannon Pryor to ensure that we have consistency and structure to give that to the person who's receiving those calls, because there are millions of calls for service every single year. So as far as, Cody, please, sir.
One more thing I'd like to add to that, there's a strong component of the Circle program overall, is that their employees have access to the HMIS system, the Homeless Management Information System. And that's critical that I left out, is it's very critical that when they show up and they meet an individual that is experiencing homelessness and they find that person, LASO or another entity could have already done an intake and said, hey, by the way, your voucher is going to be available to you in 30 days or 60 days. And based on the circumstances, that individual could have moved throughout the city, and then Circle could come into contact with that person and say, hey, by the way, what is your name and what's your information? They run it and say, oh, hey, by the way, you do have a voucher, you do have availability, let's go right now. Circle is provided with their own minivans that are throughout the city that they can transport an individual from point A to point B based on the availability of housing. And that's a very critical part to think about for the officers, being able to connect an individual 24/7, as opposed to most services are only available Monday through Friday between 9:30 and 4.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cody. So at this point, we open up for questions if you're okay with.
Commander, before we go to
certainty.
questions, was there anything else that you wanted to discuss?
No.
Was there another issue too?
Yeah, so there's Coors. We can go ahead and discuss that. And
Yeah,
it's
please, let's go into
Alejandro,
that and then
will go ahead and talk about that for us. The Coors program has a component, as we mentioned earlier, from communications to get our online reporting system up and running. And Alejandro is going to go into a little bit of detail quickly about what we're looking at as far as our process is concerned and time savings, money savings.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Officer Diaz-Valle, and I work for the Office of Operations, and I am the course coordinator on behalf of the Office of Operations. So today I'm going to talk to you about the course system. Course stands for Community Online Reporting Service. This serves the community to file reports online, which typically would have generated a police response. Pre-pandemic, there was approximately 20,000 reports coming in 2019. In 2022, post-pandemic, we are looking at 129,000 reports. So it has significantly increased throughout the pandemic. Now, the way citizens are exported into our core system is when they call communications divert the call, and they give them a link via text message, or they give them a phone number which they can call, and it takes them to the course system itself. Once they are in the link and they are in our course system, then they can complete a number of different reports. We currently have up to 20 reports, which consist of grand theft, theft from vehicle, pickpocketing, identity theft, etc. These reports then, once the filer completes the report online, it goes to our Department Operations Center for processing. It goes through a 3-tier approval process. The first approval is by a police officer who is reviewing the report to make sure that all the elements are met. From there, it goes to a watch commander to ensure the completeness of the report. Once that second approval goes through, it goes to the records units within our area records. They then conduct the final approval and review. Once that occurs, it gets disseminated to area detectives for additional follow-ups as needed. This reflects an increased awareness of the online reporting option, and community members are able to report all this without using actual police officers to respond. So the core system illustrates the availability of an additional form of response, which serves to mitigate the strain that would be otherwise placed upon the unarmed response models or police alike.
I want to clarify, can you clarify the criteria? For instance, there's grand theft involving a known suspect or an individual involving a license plate on a vehicle that was involved in a grand theft. How would that relate to a person's ability to make an online report versus otherwise requiring a more typical response to the department?
Yes, sir. So most of the reports are category 2 type of reports, which have little to no follow-up needed. Now, when the criteria is not met, then the Department Operations Center, they will reject the report, and they will advise the filer to conduct a follow-up either by calling 911 or to present themselves to the police station to make a physical police report there.
So with that, again, to quantify what this looks like, we're looking at upwards of 35,934 hours have been saved by doing it online. We're figuring about a half hour to 45 minutes for each report, and the dollar amount ends up being about $4.67 million. So as we continue to progress forward, we are going to see greater success and hopefully more salary savings and keeping our officers out in the field. And that's it. Any questions, please? We're here.
Commissioner Southers, did you have any additional questions on the Circle program? I know that you wanted to wait for that presentation.
No, thank you. You answered my questions. The only thing I'd like you to do is, unless I missed it, it seems that the dispositions that you've identified in tables 3 and 4, which are the fiscal year 22 urban alchemy disposition and 22 and 23 dispositions, I just wanted to know if those figures could be quantified to determine number of patrol hours saved as we've done with the other programs.
We can definitely do that. We'll definitely work with the mayor's office to make sure that we can quantify that and then get back with you.
Great,
without
thank
issue.
you. No, that was my only question about Circle.
Any other commissioners have questions about Circle?
One quick question. What is the city's current policy on I guess, sleeping in vehicles or living in, and is that impacting your work?
So the municipal code for sleeping in vehicles was sunsetted back in 2019, I believe. I know there's been some discussion with the city council, and I don't want to speak for the chief, but there's been some conversations about looking into that. I wouldn't be able to go into greater detail than other than that has been a topic of discussion recently.
What we're currently doing with people who are living or residing in motor vehicles is outreach-led efforts through LASA and the UHRC, the United Homeless Response Centers, to get outreach services out there. DOT also will and is enforcing abandoned vehicles, but if a location is determined or a vehicle is determined to be occupied, then they currently are not being impounded or removed absent them posing some other type of public health or public safety issue, such as being parked in a red zone, blocking an ingress or egress. And lastly, the department, working with the city, continues as the city attempts to identify more space that it could have a registered or organized safe parking program for those type of vehicles. The last report by the homeless count demonstrated that the largest increase in homeless population in the state of Los Angeles was individuals residing in vehicles. Presently, one of the lowest areas of capacity that we have is safe parking sites across the area. Commander, what would you I would estimate less than 1,000 such spaces in the entire city?
Oh, for sure, absolutely, less than 1,000.
I was at a community meeting, and I want to say you were there. I'm not sure it was in Hollenbeck Division, but which amazing. You guys, your response, the way you worked with the community was great. But I heard from the officers their frustration with not being able to tow cars that are creating a nuisance because someone's in it. So I just wanted to know like where we were with that. But yeah.
Again, to answer the question, if there's underlying activities such as narcotic activity, if the person is engaged in thefts or crimes about the area, if they're involved in violence, then the fact that they're in that vehicle is not a shelter or is not a protective factor from them being subject to criminal prosecution. So what our current posture is that identifying those individuals in those type of vehicles that are engaged in criminal activity and investigating those criminal activities. Narcotic sales is a prime example, or involved in criminal activity in the area, followed up with a problem-solving model that works with outreach and engagement to an effort to get them services. Lastly, is we look to the public safety or public health risk that vehicle may pose parked in a red zone. There are sensitive zones also that vehicle is subject to being removed for being in there, such as being adjacent to a school. Commander, is that fair?
Yes, we're working on that, and the issue is capacity. And I don't need to put Mr. T-Fank on the spot, but to be able to impound oversized vehicles and the capacity to store those, that's a whole other issue that we're working on. And we can obviously talk offline with that.
Now, all this to say that the meeting I was in, officers were working really hard to problem solve with the community. It was excellent. It's just that there's like all these different things that they have to navigate, but
Yeah, it's like you have to have a PhD in this.
to
but
navigate all the different things you can.
That's what the homeless
But they did
coordinator's
an amazing
office
job, yeah.
is to do, is to make sure that we're getting the information out consistently, meeting with our SLO liaison on each one of the divisions, expressing the fact that we want to get that voluntary compliance and educate and inform those individuals that are experiencing homelessness, and then identify who they are, try to get some type of warning in place and get that voluntary compliance. But as we build and get back to some sense of normalcy, we have to have the ability, the capacity to impound those vehicles. And right now, that's a whole nother issue. Sorry.
Commissioner, if I may, as you know, the commission is the contracting entity for our official police garages in the city, and that's administered through Commission Investigation Division. Commission Investigation personnel do not impound vehicles. That's done by patrol personnel, but we are responsible for the contract administration. The challenge is space. Our official police garages do not have room. You must hold a vehicle that is valued at under $400 and has a VIN plate, a vehicle identification plate on the vehicle until it can be processed for a lien sale, which is minimum of 45 days. If it's valued over $5,000, it has to be kept probably for about 150 days currently. So they're occupying space in tow yards before they can be gotten rid of. The real challenge we have in the city is that the movement of RVs is basically because the city allows people to live in them, they just move them. So as long as people can live in them, they just move. We work with the council offices on these efforts to go out and deal with encampments that are around the city, and about 30% of the RVs that are going to be targeted for impound are impounded, the other 70% move. So you're just moving them around the city. That's the reality of what we're dealing with. So it's space and movement of the vehicles.
But as the chief said, strategically, when we become aware of crimes, we will do everything that we possibly can to identify those issues and concerns, regardless of status, to ensure that we are making the community as safe as we possibly can. Then it turns into, as I mentioned before, the LAMC code was sunsetted for sleeping in a vehicle. I know there's been discussion about that, but we are working with all the entities from OPG to DOT to the council offices to the mayor's office and everybody in between to identify the best way to be able to handle it humanely and to get outreach out as best we possibly can, working with LASA and the homeless coordinator's office.
So I have a question for Officer Alejandra. Is that how you pronounce your name? I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
So, CORS. I'm particularly interested in the little to no follow-up. Is there a criteria, a dollar amount with respect to thefts?
That's correct.
That you have a follow-up and thefts that you don't have a follow-up?
That's correct, sir.
And what is that dollar amount?
It's 5,000.
But it's in concert with no known individual.
Correct.
So if you have a named individual that is committed a crime of a theft or anything, that's a Category 1 crime, and we'll investigate it. Now, whether city prosecutors or district attorneys' filing policies will, result in a filing, that's a whole different matter. But what we work on these criteria is what's called a solvability factors. It's based on criminal justice research as to what is the best time and energy, focus, and investment, and given the hundreds of thousands of reports and the finite number of workload, what is the best use of personnel time? And there is about 7 factors that go into that, and that's how the screening goes. And as a department, we've always used, not always, in the last 40 years, we've used solvability factors to category cases as 1 or Category 2, and which obligates us to assign personnel to Category 1 and report back. Hate crimes, for instance, are always Category 1. However, not all stolen vehicles are Category 1. In fact, the majority of them are Category 2 because you don't have a known suspect. This is primarily a property crime versus violent crime. Violent crime typically are Category 1 cases. There's nearly all instances you have an individual. What happened with the department is about 10 years ago, seeking to optimize our resources, we established an online reporting process. And for years, it was a very finite and small number of categories because we worried about the fact that would we see an increase in underlying crime issues if we went to an online reporting process. With the onset of the pandemic, and particularly with the impact of loss of 1,000+ personnel, we no longer had the luxury of having officers respond to scenes that had a low probability of being solved. And so we're now resorting to these online reporting. You also saw this with traffic reports. That was the largest investment, is where the vast majority of traffic collisions now in Los Angeles are reported online because they're not criminal for the vast majority, or they have, if they're hit and run, 85% are misdemeanors, meaning that there's no injury, and 85% of those have no suspect identified. However, misdemeanor crime with a hit and run with an identified suspect is not an online reporting. So I think we've stricken the right threshold, but certainly welcome further providing a written report or a death note or otherwise to give you the criteria of what it went into it.
So here's where I was going with my question, just so that it's plain. So while I was running one of these meetings, commission meeting, during COVID, I'm sitting there and I'm getting an alert from my bank that someone's trying to withdraw $5,000 or more from an ATM. Obviously the bank said no, but they got away with some cash. I'm panicking, contacting the chief. Who do I contact? Contact the captain. They have a detective who helps me do an online report. I hear nothing further from the department on this. I'm proactive. I contact the detective. Hey, they were at an ATM. ATMs, every single ATM has a camera. Go take a camera. I can't be the only victim of a skimming, which it turned out to be. Report. Still didn't hear anything. Fast forward a year later, I got a call from the sheriff's department. Turned out to be a theft ring that had placed these skimming devices on Wells Fargo's actual ATM itself. So they had taken the pictures. They knew who these folks were. And they're currently being prosecuted now, from what I understand, and they got hundreds of thousands of dollars this way. So that's why I had asked my question, what is the threshold dollar amount? Because if it's skimming, and even if it's 100, I mean, if they're $100 or $200, if it's over time and cumulative, this stuff could add up. And so and I understand that, trust me, I understand the numbers with respect to the department, that we don't have all the resources and stuff. But I just...
Cyber is one of our largest threats, growing threat, and the criminal enterprises are exploiting the vulnerabilities. And as a department, really as law enforcement overall, our resources are a scarcity in this area, and really relies upon, for instance, Commercial Crimes Division is working with U.S. Secret Service and the FBI on these large criminal-based organizations, many of them offshore, that are exploiting this vulnerability. But clearly the staffing levels within Commercial Crimes Division for identity theft, for fraud, is woefully inadequate. But it is a assignment based on the realities of how many people we have to work I hate to say this, the staircase of crimes, because the staircase of these property and financial matters are such a low level that we are reminding people to protect their identity, work with their banking financial institutions. That is their best safeguard, because even the criminal identification and certainly the prosecution of these individuals is not a top priority in reality in the criminal justice system today.
I think it just also underscores the need for an increased sworn personnel in the department, so that citizens of every walk of life here feel safe. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation today. Thank you very much. At this time, I move that we approve the department's report. Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. At this time, we'll have item 4C, the department's report with respect to attrition, retention, recruitment presentation. Captain Patillo, nice to see you again. Police Administrator Taft, nice to see you as well. We are familiar with your report. Can you just give us some highlights? And I'll ask the commissioners if they have any questions.
Good morning, thank you. A question was directed to recruitment regarding the educational level of recruits upon appointment. An analysis was done for the prior 4 years of appointments, and it was learned that 48% of the candidates had just a high school diploma, and 2% had only a GED or high school equivalency. The remaining 50% had some college, 30% had a bachelor's degree, 17% had an associate's degree, and 3% had a graduate degree. I gathered some additional information because it should be noted that a lot of sworn employees continue their education after appointment. Approximately 72% of the department right now has some form of higher education. That includes 6,468 members of MOU 24 who are currently receiving an educational bonus. That includes the A-level bonus, which is for an associate's degree, and then the B-level bonus for a bachelor's degree. And there are also other incentives available to sworn officers to supplement or pay for additional education, including funds from the revolving training fund. The Protective League provides higher education and training reimbursement. The Command Officers Association offers tuition and training reimbursement to its members, and I have specific amounts on all of those if those are requested. And that concludes my follow-up presentation regarding education, and I will now refer to Mr. Taft for his portion of the presentation.
Our portion of the presentation was to return with attrition levels for both those leaving the department to go to other agencies, as well as those leaving the department for reasons other than standard retirement. So the charts provided to you are pretty self-explanatory, but I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Suthers.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the follow-up. Captain Patil, thank you for the encouraging numbers, that meaning that 50% of our new candidates have college degrees. Before I go out and brag that 72% of our people have college education, what does that really mean, that 72% are getting a higher education bonus?
Out of the 6,468 members of MOU 24, so that is lieutenants and below, 2,924 are receiving the bonus that is for an associate's degree.
So the threshold is some form of college degree?
Yes.
Got it.
I guess essentially the 2 years worth of units. And 3,544 are receiving the second level, which is for a BA or BS degree. The Command Officers Association, I'm not sure what year this started, but it currently, captain has to have a 4-year degree.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, I'll just reiterate what I said before. These are selling points to our college and university students who might want to be police officers.
Yes, sir.
The other question I have is regarding attrition, and again, thank you for the follow-up. Unfortunately, that means the 986 officers who left, 809 means 82% resigned for reasons other than laterally to another agency. I just find that unbelievably staggering that 82% of the people left the profession, and I just think that's very, very discouraging. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but we have got to do something to find out why people would do that in a profession where, when you think about what the rewards are and what the benefits are in this day and age of employment, why they would choose to do that. I just don't understand that at all. So again, thank you for the figures. I really appreciate the follow-up.
Commissioner, if I can just comment on that, because the 82% hidden within there is that the vast majority of individuals who've resigned or left the department other than through retirement essentially declined to disclose. They discuss reasons other than seeking employment at another agency, whether that is because they feel that there may be some retribution or there may be some negative sanction or that the department might say somehow interfere with that. Your larger, across the industry, the profession, we are seeing a discouraging environment in this last years that have people leaving the profession. But the numbers of 8 out of 10 leaving the department because they're leaving the profession, I think is overstated. I believe that the vast majority of these men and women are in fact finding employment with other law enforcement agencies, both in the region as well as in other parts of the country. And that's really our charge. We've got to worry, we're going to worry on all aspects of people's wellness and well-being and feeling of confidence that this is a profession of meaning and that this is the right profession for them. There'll always be some mismatch. We try to minimize that. But the 3 to 7 to 10-year employee leaving the organization, it's been our experience that the majority of them are going to another agency in a relatively short period of time. Mr. Taft, is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
And I think that's where the underlying job conditions, wages, and benefits is environment in which they work is something that we will continue to work on as one of our most important strategic goals.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Thank you. And thank you, President Briggs.
Thank you. Commissioner Kalante or Commissioner Shields, do either of you have questions?
Can I just follow up on that, just
Sure.
really quick? So, I was gonna bring up the number of the, I guess a year and a half in. I guess a lot of the numbers are like at the first few years that are leaving the department. Am I reading that correctly? So if you look at, say, the second chart, you have, say if you look at Hispanic, 0 to 1.5 years on the department, it's like 258, right? Or if you look at just last year, it's 32 or 48. So they're leaving in the first 3 years.
Correct.
So I was gonna ask like what the phenomenon was, but it sounds like after hearing Chief respond to Commissioner Southers that they might be going to other departments.
An absolute truth in regards to 17,000 police agencies across America is that the Los Angeles Police Department is a highly sought trainer and developer of 21st century policing. And so the primary means in which most agencies across the country today are doing recruitment is through laterals. They are not financing or running organized academies. They instead are looking to large agencies such as this department as the feeder pool and incentivizing it through various variety of means, not just financial means, but also working conditions and job environment and housing environment and location environment. Now, with that said, we are seeing a return factor of some that are making that jump, and now we have some more than 40 personnel that are trying to come back to the organization because what they find is that the grass is not always greener and that the financial rewards or even house living or cost of living expenses do not outweigh, particularly in this region, the benefits of what it means to be a member of this organization and the opportunities that can be afforded to them. Brian, add to that, or Marla, you've short tenure, but I know Red is one of the first points of contact by all these officers that are looking to come back.
I can say that anecdotally, we are in review of a candidate who did a full 20 years with LAPD, moved out of state to do a different type of business and is coming back. So obviously we would welcome that person back. But anecdotally, we've heard more of the younger ones have gone to other agencies or are looking to go to other agencies, and they're walking away from very little investment in their pension if they've only done 2 or 3 years with LAPD, and it gives them time to start over at another agency.
Thank you.
I just had one follow-up question on that. So have there been, to the extent possible, any exit interviews, particularly for those who are going to different agencies, to understand which agencies they're going to and what incentives they have for leaving this department, and to try to address any issues here?
So I can't say we're in the process of developing a specific exit interview for those types of questions, because we have seen such a large exodus from the department recently that we do want to try to drill down and find out exactly what kind of questions we have. But like the chief had mentioned, sometimes some people who are leaving aren't necessarily honest or forthcoming of why they are leaving. So it does make it a little more difficult to drive a specific response to why they want to leave.
Commissioner, as I recall the report, though, the contents of the report indicate there was 5 factors, I believe. It's been a couple days since I looked at the report that talked about wages, that spoke about one of the aspects was a third or fourth one, talked about the existing COVID vaccine requirement that are incentives, if you will, for them to seek employment at other locations. The organization, for instance, on the COVID vaccine requirement had, I believe, about more than 150 of our personnel that left the organization in part because of, to go to agencies that did not have a vaccine mandate.
Thank you, Commissioner Shields. There being no further questions at this time, I move that we approve the department's report. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Motion carries. Thank you. At this time, we're going to bring up Commander Mastic to discuss items for D and E. We're going to bring those together. A report on California red flag law as well as domestic violence related matters. Commander, good to see you again. We've read your report. Can you just give us a highlighted summary, and then we'll have questions for you.
Terrific. I have brought
Can you
along,
please introduce?
I sure can. I brought along Detective Satanaga from our Detective Bureau to assist me in the presentation this morning. She's the author of that fact sheet. So she will give you an overview on the red flag laws, and then after we complete that, we'll move on to our next item.
Hello, everyone. Detective Marie Sanaga. So I'm here today in my capacity as the Gun Violence Restraining Order Coordinator and the Domestic Violence Coordinator. So really quickly, I know you all have the fact sheet, but for the red flag laws, just a little bit of background. So here in California, we do refer to them as the Gun Violence Restraining Orders. They went into law January 1st, 2016. And they are a civil order that needs to be obtained in civil court. There are three types, and what we really emphasize for our officers is the Gun Violence Emergency Protective Order, because it's very similar to the domestic violence EPO. It's only available for law enforcement and to be used when a person poses an immediate and present danger to themselves or others because of access to firearms or the ability to go out and buy a firearm. And less restrictive means are inappropriate or inadequate. And on that, the last part of it that gets a little confusing for our officers, what that really means is the GVROs are supposed to be a last resort. We've tried everything that we can. The subject will not consent to surrender the firearms. There's no crime, so we can't take the firearm. They're not on parole, probation. We've tried everything, but this person still has a firearm or can buy a firearm, and we think they're in immediate danger. So that's a little bit what it is. And now what we've done, we did start in 2016. We published procedures on the GVROs, did some training, but in 2019, a city attorney was assigned to only handle GVROs, and I met with her, and we discussed ways to expand it, what we needed to do to really bring more awareness to the department. So we worked with some other people on developing a special order where we expanded and enhanced our procedures and did more training. And the big thing that came out of that is we created an area gun violence restraining order coordinator at each of the 21 geographic areas. And we trained them so they could be, the contact person at the area if officers had questions. And then in 2022, there was also renewed interest at the time. Looking at our numbers, I can say we created, we didn't really create that. The tracking was sending the GVROs by email to me, and I was on a spreadsheet trying to track, so not the best way to track it. So in 2022, there were 2 assigned city attorneys. They now work for Public Safety General Counsel. Their primary responsibility is to represent the department at court hearings and to provide training and advice to personnel. We've done a big push to get resources out. We've done a GVRO flowchart and an information sheet with FAQs. There's a pocket card for officers to explain the types of GVROs and when they can use them, a roll call video, a resource binder for those area GVRO coordinators. We also have a flow chart that explains the difference between an EPO, like domestic violence, elder abuse EPO, and then GV EPO, because we saw that a lot of people were having questions.
And then we also created a database on our internal website to track the GVRs, to have better tracking. Unfortunately, when we developed that, we realized our city attorneys don't have access to it. So they've been tracking it on a Google spreadsheet. This wasn't in the fact sheet, and I realized I didn't have it in there, but just wanted to give you a little bit of statistics to show with this renewed push and awareness to get the information out to the department. For 2023 through July 6th, compared to 2022, all three of the types of GVROs, the EPO, TRO, and the GVRO after hearing, for 2023, we've had 43. And compared for all of 2022, we had 29. So we are obtaining more. We're also, for 2023 through July 6th, we've had 51 inquiries to the city attorneys because they make themselves available. They go to all the stations, go to roll calls, put their number out there so officers will call to just run a scenario by them. So there was 51 through July 6th compared to 14 in 2022. So to me, that shows that the officers are becoming aware of this resource and calling and considering it and running scenarios by, and we like that. And that's basically the run through. I gave some recommendations on what we could do to raise awareness and to track more. A database that we could all use would be one of my main points. And then also, I think just community awareness. I think we are doing a better job on the department getting information out there, but a lot of the community, especially with the gun violence temporary restraining orders that are available to certain members of the community, a lot of people don't know about it. And in fact, the LA County Office on Violence Prevention, Gun Violence Prevention Work Group, that is one of their goals, is to promote awareness. So I think working with them, we could assist the community in learning about this tool.
Thank you, Detective. I got to tell you, I'm kind of surprised to learn this information. And the reason is in my other job, I've often obtained restraining orders on behalf of celebrities who have been stalked or what have you. And in those situations, I always check the box. No guns, keep your distance. Court's always granted. Go register it with local law enforcement or, the sheriff's department. And they have a statewide system, is what I've been told. But are you telling me something different now, that there is no statewide system to which all law enforcement has access to, and it's not there, that if you punch in this information, it doesn't pop up, and okay, this individual is restrained from having this gun, and therefore he's in violation, and you can take them to jail?
So no, sir. We are specifically with the red flag law, what Maria had explained was the gun violence restraining orders, we call them GVROs. It fills a particular niche. You don't have someone that committed a crime. You don't have someone that's been held on domestic violence, but we want to cause them to become a prohibited possessor because their behavior has escalated so much that we believe, law enforcement believes, that the city attorney can bring this to court and we can get them restrained from having the gun. What Maria is talking about with that database is just the GVROs, just this particular one.
A separate database.
Correct.
Okay.
Internal.
Okay. Okay.
So Amanda's going to bring it to court. She's going to file it with the court, specifically with those that she had referred to. I believe it's 42 here today. So 42, those 42 we're tracking here. And once that's implemented and once it's on file with the court, it does go into that system. And so all of those restraining orders, for example, a police officer responds to a radio call, detains someone. The person reporting indicates, I've got a restraining order on our file. The officer runs them, it will come up with that database. But we also keep a copy on file at the police station, each respective police station, so they can bring up a hard copy if they need to.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Calanche, any questions?
I was just going to say that this seems to be, I think it's a great idea that we're doing this or that this exists, because a lot of these mental health calls do involve guns, where like had we removed the gun or had the family member, so we talk about outreach, I think it's really important that family members know that this is available so that they can remove these weapons from the home. But yeah, so more outreach. But I didn't know about it either, so thank you for the information.
Any further questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Suthers.
Thank you for the report. So Detective, my question is about your first recommendation. Absolutely agree. My concern is the cybersecurity around a Google spreadsheet. A, and B, that the city attorneys have to use that to research the information. Is your recommendation attached to a technology firm or organization that's going to develop this database, or is this something that we need, but we haven't written a proposal to have it? In other words, is there a timeline? Are we going to be a year from now still having our city attorneys look at a Google spreadsheet?
We would need to identify a vendor or an organization to use, but.
Or one possibility would be to get LAN access to the city attorney, to our existing files. So that is something we could work on. The homepage for police officers, when they log on to the LAN page. If we could have a city attorney that had access to that, they would have the homepage access, not the passwords and accounts to run somebody necessarily, but to click on the link from the homepage and get access to that particular database. That's something we can certainly work on, sir.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, it's rather sooner than later because that's concerning. I know Google says the Google spreadsheet is secure. What a surprise. But I don't believe that. So, thank you.
Understood, sir.
So, Commander and Chief, it would seem to me that California's red flag law is important in preventing violence. More often than not, violence against women, as I understand it, how this plays out. Would you describe the red flag law as a useful preventative tool that helps law enforcement?
Yes.
Agreed. I agree with Maria. This particular law, it's a very bullseye specific type law. So if we had somebody who's accused of a crime, they wouldn't qualify for the GVRO. If we took them on a 72-hour evaluation, they wouldn't qualify for that. So it has to be they're committing conduct that believe is very suspicious, that may escalate to something like that. In that case, the police officer would apply for the GVRO, request it on off hours, oftentimes on off hours. And if it fit that particular standard, then the commissioner would grant it during off hours. We have a lot of requests that come in that the commissioners come back and say, hey, they haven't committed a crime, you don't have probable cause to arrest, they're not a danger to themselves or others, otherwise we would have taken them on an evaluation. So it doesn't meet the standard to grant it. So it's a two-way street. It's both the training portion for the police officers that roll out and deal with it on that call at night, as well as meeting the standard by the commissioner. And it's not a real clear-cut threshold on the commissioner's side. So the law is in place. So it's a hit and miss. Oftentimes we apply and we don't get it, is what I'm getting at.
And if I could just add to this, what you're looking at, Commissioner, is what we're looking at. California has one of the most stringent set of gun law restrictions in America. We're a Brady A state. Red flag laws, this is the latest component of it for the state of California. And it is a niche that's filling an area that has previously been viewed as underserved and in a gray area. Gray areas cause issues in the sense of people's understanding of them, both law enforcement as well as the public, commissioners on the judicial branch understanding it. What the department has done is we're following the San Diego model, which is seen as the best in this region, if not the country, which assigns a dedicated city attorney along with a devoted individual. I'd like for it to be one person, not doing two roles of gun violence restraining orders and domestic violence. However, we see the intersect as you do. So we have this detective handling that aspect. And then awareness through education and inspections. Chief Pitcher has been, as well as now Commander Mastic, has been ruthless in regards to monthly inspections of areas. We now track the number of these requests as well as the numbers that are issued. And we see that you can expect what you inspect, that we're seeing an increase. The areas that we wish to see improvements on is an understanding that there are many more restraining orders that are issued above this water line. So people look and say 40 or 50 in the entire city of 4 million, how can that be enough? That's a drop in a bucket. There are many other domestic violence restraining orders that are issued as a matter of course with a 273-5 arrest. That would not have this niche. It would instead have a DVR, a DVRO, or an EPO. That's where these reports have to at times be reflective of this is a smaller aspect of a larger, more complex system to address gun violence.
Thank you, Chief. Because where I was going with this is I was recently learned, as did most of the nation, that the U.S. Supreme Court decided it wanted to take up a case involving whether or not the courts can prohibit those individuals who have been found to engage in domestic violence from carrying guns. And I think this is going to be problematic insofar as, number one, they've taken up this case, number two, the composition of the court, knowing where this may go and the problems that it may cause. It may be something that the chiefs of police nationally may want to consider a friend of court brief concerning the impact that this law has on restraining violence and how it's helpful to police departments across the country. So, thank you for your, was there a subsequent presentation or did you?
Oh, we do have a subsequent, just on that last note, misdemeanor domestic violence would be that last niche. So, as of now, misdemeanor domestic violence is approved that for a prohibited possessor, they would not be able to have a gun. But for felony domestic violence, they would fall into the felon category. And that, I would hope that would stay intact.
Understood. Thank you. I move that we approve the department's report and transmit it to City Council with respect to the red flags law. Is there a second?
I second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. I move that we approve the department's domestic violence related matters report and transmit it to City Council. Is there a second? Motion been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you both. Thank you. At this time, can we have Captain Zarkani come forward and present on the response to Public Safety Committee request from the City Council concerning the existing protocol for identifying and responding to new street drugs. Good afternoon, Captain. It's been a long day so far. We've read your report. Can you give us the highlights, not the long version, if you don't mind?
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Chief, Mr. Smith, Mr. T. Fang, and Mr. City Attorney. I know the time is limited, so I'm going to pass this to Detective Vito Sesha. He's in charge of our clandestine lab squad, and he's the one who authored this report.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I'll just hit the highlights, just going over the recommendation. In terms of identification from a law enforcement perspective, the majority of the identification that we receive is usually through recruit training in the identification and handling of controlled substances. Obviously, that education is ongoing. We receive or constantly published training bulletins regarding the handling of a variety of narcotics and substances and how to assess the scene and book those items into evidence. In terms of a response, street drugs are always a concern for us, especially considering that a lot of the times there are unknown analogs associated with those substances, obviously the biggest one right now being fentanyl. Bearing that and keeping that in mind, that is why Gang and Narcotics Division recommendation is to follow the special order that's currently out from Counterterrorism and Special Order Operations Bureau notice, which specifically deals with the handling of fentanyl. If the protocols outlined in that notice are followed in any set of circumstances where an officer may come on scene and based on their training and experience or the totality of the circumstances or suspect statements, they're unable to determine what kind of narcotic that they're dealing with. As long as they follow the protocols outlined in those procedures, they'll be fine in terms of safety. I know another report back that the council was seeking, I'm sorry, that the commission was seeking, dealt with information sharing. So a majority, like I said, a majority of the information that, from a law enforcement perspective, that we receive is usually through the training that we receive in the academy or ongoing training that we seek on our own, as well as the training bulletins that regularly come out that outline how we should handle or deal with specific controlled substances. Other than that, we also have a close, Gang and Narcotics Division has a close relationship with the Drug Enforcement Agency, which is at the forefront of identifying a lot of unknown narcotics or designer drugs or street drugs. Once they identify those substances, they'll put a bulletin out and make it available to law enforcement. DEA also provides training, but again, that's for law enforcement. Another entity that is good for information sharing is the Joint Regional Information Center. The benefit to that is anyone who can show that they hold a critical position in the infrastructure of a government can have access to that information. And they put daily bulletins out in terms of any activity that could impact the infrastructure of that locality, as well as anything that could impact the safety of the citizens of that locality. Other than that, that's pretty much the highlights I have in terms of the report back.
So I have a question for you, because the report does mention clandestine labs. In the media reports that most of the fentanyl labs, I guess, are south of the border. Do we have fentanyl labs here in our Los Angeles County?
Not that we've come across, and technically, under the legal definition, fentanyls are not labs, they're pill press operations. So that's what we would experience on this side. But a majority of the fentanyl that we're getting from across the border are already coming in the form of pressed pills. Either that, or sometimes we'll seize kilos of powdered fentanyl. But as far as my squad, we have not come across any fentanyl pill press operations.
Are the precursor drugs coming into Los Angeles?
No, sir. Everything's being shipped to Mexico, for the most part from China, and then it's being manufactured in Mexico.
Okay, and that includes the designer drugs that are mentioned in your report?
Fentanyl, the designer, with the exception of ecstasy, that could be manufactured here. We have come across a pill press operation that was manufacturing ecstasy. But in terms of any other manufactured or designer drug, that's the only other one that we've seen. We haven't, tranq or xylazine is another concern. It's an animal tranquilizer. It has a lot of the same effects of fentanyl, with the exception that Narcan will not work on it. But if there's a plus to it, it's not fatal in the sense that you can touch it or manipulate it. Obviously, if it becomes aerosolized or ingested, it could become fatal.
Where I was going with this line of questioning was whether or not we had the capacity with federal and state partners to interdict any of the precursor drugs, such that, you know, we basically cut off supplies.
So we do participate in a variety of task forces, one of them being HIDTA, which is the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Task Force, which works closely with the DEA. And then another one is LA Impact, which is a state-run task force comprised of a lot of local entities, local law enforcement entities. And as a matter of fact, that my unit actually works out of LA Impact.
Thank you. Commissioner Shields, any questions?
You know, one question that the city council had is how the department responds to these new drugs, including xylazine, which you mentioned just doesn't respond to Narcan. Are there any established protocols of how you're supposed to deal with an individual who has digested it if Narcan's not really an option?
the first response will be to try to render aid, and then obviously get EMS en route as soon as possible. Regardless of whether or not, xylazine is usually taken in concert with fentanyl. So regardless of whether or not, there's no adverse effect to administering numerous doses of Narcan. So that would still be an option in hopes that there may be something else on board that individual system other than xylazine.
Commissioner Kalanche? Commissioner Suthers? Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. At this time, I move that we approve the department's report and transmit it to the Public Safety Committee of the City Council. Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. At this time, we're going to be in recess and go into closed session.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss agenda items 5A in accordance with Government Code 54957.
We're back in session.
The Board of Police Commissioners have concluded their work in closed session. We're now back in open session. The Executive Director will report out.
Related to item 5A1, officer involved shooting number 039-22. As tactics, 1 police officer, 2, administrative disapproval, 4-0. 1 police officer, 2, no action, vote was 2-2. Drawing and exhibiting in policy, 2 police officer 2s. Lethal use of force out of policy, administrative disapproval, 1 police officer 2. Relates to item 5A2, officer involved shooting 040-22. Chief's recommendations were adopted on a 4-0 vote, which were tactics, administrative disapproval, 2 police officer 2s. Tactical debrief, 1 sergeant 1, 1 police officer 3. Drawing and exhibiting in policy, 2 police officer 2s. Lethal use of force out of policy, administrative disapproval, 1 police officer 2. That concludes the report out.
Thank you, Mr. Tiefank. There being no further business before the Board of Police Commissioners, I move that we adjourn. Is there a second? Second. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.